Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the 9th episode of the narrative, which takes place 3 years after the war with the Akatsuki, and Naruto is ready to gain a surprising new colleague to finally take the Chunnin examinations. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. The fighter's arena looked like a full-scale war had taken place on it. The ground had large holes in it and debris from shattered trees littered the outer wall. A recess was called to prepare the ground for the semi-final matches. The crowd was still talking about seeing the great sage fight Gaara's apprentice. Sakura said, "It was scary seeing Naruto summon that much wind. To think that's the same jutsu he uses to clean up messes at his house." His friends nodded in agreement. Guy said, "I bet Gaara is very proud of Matsuri right now, even though he isn't showing it. She bared that wind jutsu for so long." Lee excitedly replied, "I bet he is Guy-sensei. But the next match should prove to be most interesting." He threw his fist into the air. Naruto's students are going to be fighting each other to get to the final match. Konohamaru has been trained by him for 8 years, but Hanabi has the Hyuga clan's gentle fist and she's a sage now. I simply do not know which side to root for," Lee said while grabbing his head and tossing it back and forth in indecision. "Calm down, Lee, before you hurt yourself," Sakura scolded him. He hung his head apologetically and sat down. Lord Hyuga, Hinata, and Neji were sitting together waiting for the next fight in anticipation. Hinata eyed her father for a moment and respectfully said, "Father, are you worried about Hanabi? You look awfully tense." Hayashi released his tight grip on the armrest of his seat and turned to look at her. "Yes, I am a little worried. I have no idea what kind of jutsus Naruto taught her. Her speed and reflexes have greatly increased, but is her gentle fist art still intact? These are my worries," he said in a reserved manner. "Uncle, you shouldn't worry so much. Konohamaru is fighting her next. Naruto will kill him if he hurts his girlfriend," Neji said with a rare smile on his face. "Father, it should be an easier fight than the one she had with Takia. Konohamaru isn't known for deception. He is a straight-up fighter, which is the kind of ninja we are best suited to fight." She tried to comfort him. Hayashi let out a deep breath while never losing his composure. "True," Neji said. "Hanabi always beats Konohamaru in their sparring matches." Hayashi nodded his head in agreement. "They are both his students though. They both subscribe to his Nindo. If neither of them back down, then this fight will likely leave them both seriously hurt. You're worrying over nothing. They train together and they are friends. They aren't going to try to kill each other out there, uncle," Neji said in a light-hearted manner which was clearly out of his usual character. Hayashi looked down and shook his head. "I just have an ominous feeling something bad is going to happen." Naruto came out of the fighter's prep room looking over his shoulder at Tsunade. She wasn't scowling at him, but he could tell that he was still going to get at her from later. He wore a reserved, strained look as he took his place next to Kakashi at the railing. "Are you worried?" he asked him. Naruto was looking over his shoulder at the Hokage and said, "Yup. I think she's going to kill me after this is over." Kakashi looked at him, then over at the Hokage before returning his gaze to him. "Not about that. About your students fighting each other?" he asked. Naruto looked back over at him and then looked up and thought. "No, not really. They get along pretty well during training," he said casually without worry. Kakashi gave him an awkward look and said, "Naruto, this isn't training. They are really going to fight each other. This isn't some sparring match. Hanabi is the heir to the Hyuga clan and Konohamaru has his pride as the grandson of the third Hokage. They both have their reputation to uphold, Konohamaru most of all after his last match." "How was their mental state backstage?" he asked. Naruto looked bored as he slumped on the railing waiting for the match to start. Konohamaru looked very determined and Hanabi looked, "I'm not sure. I guess it's that face that most high-up nobles wear," he said. Self-pride. Kakashi said knowingly. Yeah, I guess so, but she's humble and striving toward a purpose too. He scratched his head in frustration. Kami, girls are always hard for me to read. Kakashi eyed him carefully for a long moment and asked. Who do you think is the stronger fighter? He lazily said. If Hanabi was combat proficient and entering Sage mode, then Konohamaru wouldn't stand a chance, I'm sorry to say. Konohamaru outclasses her in chakra, stamina, and ninjutsu. She is better at taijutsu, chakra control, and she is also smarter than him, but he has more experience in combat. Erg! It's making my head hurt to think so much about it, he said as he grabbed his head. I guess I'm happy that she can't use Sage mode because this way they are fairly evenly matched, he said as he picked his head up. Kakashi suddenly noticed a small monkey in a diaper sitting on the railing next to Naruto. He put on a smile and said, Hello Elder Raichi, what brings you here? Naruto looked around until he found the monkey. Elder! You're not even out of diapers. How can you be one of the monkey elders? He looked at him, clearly disbelieving Kakashi's words. Raichi spoke, but not in the cute and childlike voice that he used before. He spoke in an old harsh voice. That's right. I'm an elder, you wart sage, he said angrily. But, why the diaper then? He stuttered while pointing a quivering finger at it. Raichi gave him a flat, sarcastic look before putting on a fake smile and said, You see, Sonny, when you get really, really old you start having some heath problems. Naruto gave him a curious look and leaned over toward him. Health problems? Yes, he said with a wave of his hand like he was talking to a 2-year-old about a fairy tale. When you get really old you might lose control over your bowels. Hence the reason why I'm wearing one, he said as his look went back being flat and sarcastic. Naruto covered his mouth and tried not to laugh, but it was obvious that he was. You were one when you're first brought into this world and you'll probably wear one just before you leave it too, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. I'm fine, little Kakashi. How have you been? I haven't seen you for almost 2 decades. It's nice to see you've loosened up. You were always too serious before, he said casually. Yes, I loosened up long ago. Are you here to see your new clan member fight? He asked. Yes, I want to see if that knucklehead has any sense at all. He is so thick-headed and his arrogant pride has been quite hard to break, Raichi said as he looked over at Naruto with a scornful look. I guess he gets that from his master. Naruto gave him a strained smile and said, If you think he's bad now, you should have seen him before he started training with me. He has calmed down a lot since then. The small monkey slumped his shoulders and hung his head. Even Hiruzen wasn't this hard to break. Kakashi looked over at him and said, So you've had your work cut out for you then? Raichi tossed him a sarcastic look and said, You have no idea. He keeps complaining all the time. I'm gonna be Hokage someday. You should respect me, or he'll say I'm gonna be the greatest ninja in history. You just watch. Oh, and there's my favorite, why the hell do I have to do that? I'm here to train, not to be your servant. I swear the boy doesn't have an ounce of humility in him. It's like being married again, all he does is nag and complain, he said, clearly lost on what to do with him. Naruto gave him a slight chuckle and said, That's because you don't know how to handle him. It's simple really. If he's not eating, sleeping, training or on a mission, then he's complaining. The monkey looked over at him and said, I will not train him until he respects me. It's that simple. Kami! I've made a fool out of him so many times that I figured he would get it through his head that he is no match for me. Kakashi let out a sigh and said, Like master, like student. Naruto was the same way. Raichi gave him a curious look and asked, You train Naruto? Kakashi nodded his head. Yes, I was his Jonin instructor. Naruto was also a slow learner and fell for the same obvious traps again and again. I really struggled to teach him until Jiraiya showed me how to handle someone with his type of personality. The elder was clearly interested and said, and he told me that Naruto is the kind of person that needs to strive for a goal. If he doesn't have a goal, or if he feels that you as a teacher aren't helping him with his goal, that he will get annoyed. So the answer is to give him a goal, he replied. Raichi gave him a disbelieving look and said, isn't being a monkey sage a goal enough already? Yes, but he doesn't know what a monkey sage can do. He's never seen one in action. He has, however, seen Naruto and what a toad sage can do. Right now he probably feels that the monkey clan isn't that great and is lamenting the fact that he couldn't join the toad clan. All you have to do is impress and you'll get more respect and dedication than you can handle, Kakashi said knowingly. Raichi eyed him carefully and asked, how would I impress him in such a way? Kakashi and Naruto like mirror images on themselves. The both stuck out their hands. Naruto summoned a Rasengan and Kakashi preformed the Chidori. They both said at the same time, show him a jutsu. The monkey looked at them in surprise as they let their jutsus fade away. If you do that, then you can get him to do just about anything and you can just tell him it's training to learn the jutsu, Kakashi said with a fake smile and his pointer finger up. Naruto's look went blank at first, then it turned to one of offense at his sensei. Hey! I knew some of your training was off over the years. Having me clean your house as part of training. I knew something was fishy. He yelled at him. Kakashi and Raichi laughed at him. Well, now that you're a sensei too, I can reveal how to punish your students without them knowing it, he said with a smile. How is that supposed to be punishment then if they don't know it? He asked, clearly a little put out as he crossed her arms and looked away from him. Because you get some work out of them. At least it made me feel better when you got too unruly, he said while smiling. The monkey laughed again. I see. I think I'm going to enjoy teaching this kind of student when we get back to the temple, he said in a much brighter mood. After a few more minutes, Proctor Kotetsu came onto the field. The crowd suddenly cheered, thinking the fight was about to start. Kotetsu held up his hands to call for silence. Once the crowd finally calmed down, he said loudly, to prevent a mishap, like during the last fight, where the audience was caught in a jutsu, the Umbu has decided to put a barrier before the match starts. Seeing as how both of the next fighters call the one that caused. He looked right at Naruto with a disapproving look, that mishap master. The Umbu protection squad felt it was necessary for everyone's safety. We apologize for the delay. He bowed and returned into the fighter's room. 10 Umbu came out and formed a barrier while Naruto put his head in his hands and said to himself, Kami, I hope this cyclone thing doesn't get around like the leveling a mountain thing did. Kakashi smiled and said, only a few people saw you level the mountain. All of the 5 nations' leaders saw the cyclone. Naruto hung his head in dismay. Soon Hanabi in her Toad clan uniform came out with Konohamaru behind her. The crowd cheered loudly for them as they took their places. Kakashi told Naruto quietly. Konohamaru seemed serious, deadly serious. Naruto had never seen that look on Konohamaru, but just with his facial expression Kakashi could tell he agreed. Kotetsu quietly asked them, are you two ready? Hanabi nodded, but Konohamaru held up his hand and said, please hold on a moment. I need to say something to Hanabi. Hanabi tilted her head at him in curiosity. There were only 2 people in the village she could name as her friends, Naruto and Konohamaru. Of the 2, she had always found it easier to talk to Konohamaru. The nervous look of sadness in his eyes sent her mind to worry. Are you okay, Konohamaru? She asked nervously. He closed the gap between them and wrapped his arms around her in a fierce hug. Hanabi was so stunned by his actions that she couldn't move as Konohamaru said quietly into her ear, I'm sorry in advance. Please don't think badly of the third. Think badly of the third, what is he talking about? She thought in utter confusion. The crowd murmured in confusion as Naruto's cold eyes locked onto Konohamaru. Anger, outrage, and jealousy shined brightly in his eyes. Konohamaru broke his hug and held her away from him by the shoulders. He looked at the beautiful and stunned Hyuga heiress for a long moment before letting go of her shoulders. He took 3 steps backwards and returned to his original place. Kotetsu blushed at them and asked, "Are you two ready now?" Hanabi nervously blushes as well and said nothing. Konohamaru looked at her with his serious eyes that held sadness behind them that she could see right through. "Hanabi, I have a favor to ask before we start," he said as she stared at him blankly, still trying to recover from his actions. "I want you to enter Sage mode before we fight," he asked her honestly and so purely even in his sadness. Hanabi was stunned to her core. It took her many long moments to speak, and when she did she said, Konohamaru, I wasn't lying when I said I wasn't a sage yet. Yet you have entered Sage mode before." "I know. Naruto told me that the first time you enter Sage mode is when you receive those dark marks around your eyes marking you as a sage," he said solemnly. "Please," he said earnestly as he bowed to her. It's not that simple. I've only entered Sage mode once of my own accord. It took 6 hours of meditation in the most peaceful of places. I don't think I can do it here. Naruto makes it look easy. It's really not," she said in a panic. Konohamaru locked his intense eyes on her. "Will you try?" he said so purely and honestly. His words echoed and reverberated in her mind. She closed her eyes and tilted her head down for a long moment. She took a long deep breath and picked her head up to look at him. "I will try." Kotetsu looked at her in surprise as the crowd murmured. Hanabi took off her Toad Clan outer coat and sat down crossed-legged and began meditating. "That girl can enter Sage mode?" an older man said in disbelief. "She was trained by the great sage after all." A younger man next to him said. Naruto yelled out to him, "Are you sure you want this? Even I had trouble handling her when she was in Sage mode." Konohamaru turned to look at Naruto and yelled back at him, "This is how it must be." Naruto mumbled to himself, "It's your funeral." Hanabi tried again and again to become one with everything around her, but it was much harder with so many people in the arena. "I have to concentrate, become one with my surroundings," she told herself to no avail. There was just too much around her. "No! I have to try harder," she told herself as she clenched her teeth and remembered the sad look on Konohamaru's face. 40 minutes had passed and many in the crowd were starting to think she couldn't do it. "That girl can't do it. I don't care if she is Naruto's student and the heiress to the Hyuga clan. This is all a stage act. I'm going to get something to eat," someone said. "Yeah, me too. I'm bored," another said. Konohamaru's eyes never left her face as a lone cloud passed overhead and threw a shadow over her for a moment. "Think harder, what did it feel like?" she asked herself. She remembered Naruto's smiling face. She saw the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She remembered Naruto soaked in toad oil sitting on the back of a stone frog under a waterfall. He was surrounded in dazzling golden sage chakra. She remembered the feeling of the oil on her skin and what his skin felt like when she touched him. She remembered the feeling she had when she touched his hand and rested her face next to his. She felt her one single greatest desire yet again. "I want to sit on that toad with you. To be by your side forever, that is what becoming a sage is to me." As the shadow of the cloud left and light again returned to her face, the thin black circles around her eyes grew. Konohamaru's look never changes as the crowd awed at her transforming. The dark mark encompassed her eyes and grew into long black points that went down her cheeks and up her forehead until they met at the top of her head as the points crossed. Hanabi opened her milky white eyes and smiled a smile of joy before letting loose of a contagious laugh. Konohamaru gave her a very curious look at how happy she was and asked, "What does it feel like?" Hanabi couldn't stop smiling and said loudly, "I feel, well, it's indescribable. I feel invincible and really happy. I can feel and see everything for miles. Is that really what Sage Mode feels like? Choji asked everyone around him. Only at first. Naruto told him from over his shoulder at the railing that wasn't far away. Konohamaru nodded his head at her and grabbed the bottom of his shirt. He pulled it off and stunned the crowd. Kakashi's eyes went wide as he stared at the giant seal on Konohamaru's chest. The seal was so big it warped around his sides and nearly touched in the back. The seal looked like a gothic black sun with a cage in the center with 3 flying birds in it. Tsunade hung her head as mummers rose in the crowded arena. What is that? Hanabi asked intently as she stared at the seal in blank shock. Are you a Jin? No? He cut her off. This is the curse of my clan, he said sadly. Curse of your clan? The Sarutobi clan has a curse? She asked him in shock. My real name isn't Konohamaru Sarutobi. It's A, he said before Tsunade stood up and yelled at him. Konohamaru. Don't reveal that. It's a village secret. Her voice was full of anger and worry. He turned and looked at her calmly. No, it's a clan secret. My clan and I am its keeper as the last living pure-blooded member. The Hokage hung her head and said softly. Everything will change for you if you reveal that. So the honorable grandson of the third Hokage will be shunned. That doesn't matter anymore. Today the curse of my clan will end with me, one way or the other. He said calmly with resolve. One way or the other? What are you talking about? Hanabi asked in confusion. He turned back to her and said. As I was saying. My real name isn't Konohamaru Sarutobi, it Konohamaru Zendaki. Hanabi looked at him in confusion. My clan was also known by a more common name, the Zaban Death Clan. Kakashi's fist clenched as killing intent poured out of him while looking at Konohamaru. It took him a long moment to calm himself down. The crowd murmured in confusion. Zaban clan? I've never heard of them. Hanabi said as she tilted her head at him. No, you wouldn't have. All the records were burned by the first and second Hokages. Only a few of the oldest people here would remember them, the Umbu knows of my clan. He said with an eerie calm. The barrier around the arena suddenly dropped as the Umbu stepped onto the railing and pulled out their weapons while looking at him. The arena was tensely silent for a long moment, until the sound of 1,000 chirping birds broke the silence. Kakashi charged him with his Chidori in hand and a cold expressionless look on his face. Naruto's eyes went wide as he saw the killing intent in his sensei's eyes. Kakashi was inches away from slamming his Chidori through Konohamaru's chest when Naruto used his yellow flash jutsu and appeared in between them. He caught Kakashi by the forearm as the lightning crackled in his hand. Naruto looked at his sensei's cold emotionless eyes in shock and anger. Kakashi! What are you doing? Konohamaru looked at him and calmly said. He's doing exactly what he was trained to do in the Umbu Black Ops. The Zaban clan is. Kakashi spoke up and finished his sentence for him. Marked. They are one of the few clans we are taught to kill on sight. What the hell? Naruto yelled. You're trying to kill Konohamaru? Umbu, stand down. Tsunade yelled in a commanding voice. I hereby repeal the decree of the first Hokage calling for the elimination of the Zendaki clan. The Umbu on the railing backed off. Kakashi, however, was still staring at him with his cold eyes. Naruto, Kakashi, get out of the fighting arena. Umbu, replace that shield now. She commanded them while pointing. Konohamaru looked at Kakashi and said, Don't you want to know the real reason why the first and second Hokages made a 10-year-old boy the third Hokage? Kakashi released his jutsu. I'll be watching you carefully from now on. Kakashi said in a warning manner as he returned with Naruto to the railing outside of the fighting area. What's going on? Hanabi asked him in utter confusion as the Umbu put up the shield again. He took a long deep breath and turned to face her solemnly. It all started hundreds of years ago. None of this can be confirmed, but I will tell you the story of my clan's history. Once long ago it was said that Kami came down from the heavens and blessed a man with a white chakra. This white chakra gave this man a vast understanding and incredible healing powers. This man became a very holy person and traveled the lands healing and helping people. When he had a son, he found out that his newborn child had this same white chakra. The son grew up and followed the same path as his father, helping people and healing the sick and injured. This is the start of my clan. All the members born into the Zendaki clan have both normal chakra and white chakra. They lived mainly in a temple on the northern border of the Land of Fire for hundreds of years. That was until 120 years ago. During a vast war, the members of my clan found a way to use their white chakra to hurt people and used it in the war. They gained the ability to reopen any wounds a person had ever gotten. They also found they could make a person sick with every kind of sickness they had ever had. They became a frightening clan on the battlefield of war because they could devastate entire armies with their power. This is when my clan became known as the Zob and Death clan. After the war was over, they returned to their temple. It wasn't until the first child was born into the clan after they had used their power for war that they learned of their curse. The first child that was born wasn't born with pure white chakra. His chakra had the faintest color of pinkite and his healing gifts weren't as strong. The white chakra was starting to get tainted from the clan members' deeds. In the time just before the founding of our village, my clan used their powers again for war. We helped Madara Uchiha with his war with the Senju clan. My clan's powers had greatly diminished and we could no longer use our white chakra as they had before because it was so tainted with blood that it became red. It became a blight on its members and anyone near them. If the chakra wasn't sealed away, the members would get very sick and spread a deadly disease. This curse was Kami's punishment for abusing his gift. Madara was using my clan members to devastate towns by removing their seal, holding back their now red chakra. They would go berserk with power and level most of the town in a matter of minutes, but they would also almost always die and spread their pestilence. Luckily, there weren't very many members of my clan left, so we are more of a footnote in the entire war. When Hashirama found out how Madara was using the last few remaining members of my clan, he and his brother went to our temple and killed the last few members except for one. They didn't kill my grandfather because he didn't have the seal on him and he had no red chakra. He was only 4 years old and he was free of the taint. Tobirama Senju took him in near the end of the war and trained him. Hashirama became the first Hokage and brought peace to the lands. Afterward, he handed the title over to his brother to lead. Hiruzen learned at a frightening rate, mastering all kinds of jutsu with ease. It was on his 10th birthday that they decided that the village no longer needed war generals as its leader. They told Hiruzen everything they knew about his clan and their taint. He begged them for redemption for the shame of his clan on top of what is today the Hokage monument. They saw that he would be a great leader and told him, "For the crimes of your clan, we sentence you to a lifetime of serving this village. Tomorrow we will call you Hokage." He became the third Hokage and had 2 sons, my father and my late uncle Asuma. They were also born with the tainted chakra and had this seal placed on them. He said as he rested his hand on the seal on his chest. At the age of 15, Hiruzen removed Asuma's seal and they fought until the red chakra had been used up. He taught them that if they used up their chakra fast enough, then they would become free of the curse and wouldn't spread the disease. My father watched them from afar as they fought. He thought Asuma almost killed his father and decided he would rather live with the seal than risk killing the Hokage. The information on how my mother and father died is sealed, so I don't have that part of the story. I was taken in as a baby and raised by my grandfather and the village, all the while carrying the taint of my clan that had been sealed away. Now you know why Kakashi tried to kill me," he said. Hanabi stared at him in shock before saying, "That's a horrible story. My clan isn't all bad. Grandfather was a great Hokage and the teachings of my clan are still in uses today," he told her. "What teachings?" she questioned him. "I told you that my clan was once filled with blessed holy people that were exceptional healers. The third Hokage passed on the knowledge of our healing arts to one of his students," he said. "But who?" she asked in confusion. Konohamaru pointed up at the Hokage. "To the 5th Hokage, to Lady Tsunade." Why do you think that she is the most renowned healer in the 5 nations? It's because she learned the Zendaki's clan's teachings and she has even passed them on to Sakura and Ino. Even Naruto found out one of our clan's healing techniques on his own. Tsunade stared at him blankly. That's right. The raw chakra transfer is one of my clan's techniques, Konohamaru said. Everyone eyed the Hokage as Konohamaru dropped his arm. It's true. The third did teach me their healing arts, but that doesn't mean everything about their clan was tainted, she told the audience. Konohamaru looked over at Kakashi. Do you still want to kill me, former head of the Umbu Black Ops? I think my clan has paid enough for their crimes. We gave the village a great Hokage and our healing arts. Kakashi eyed him without emotion. You're still too dangerous to be kept in the village. That disease kills people in 2 days, and if that seal breaks you'll go berserk. Konohamaru gritted his teeth as anger showed on his face. How am I any different than Naruto? He yelled at him. Everyone that knew about Naruto's being a Jinchuriki was stunned. Kakashi was among them. Me and my master are very much alike, he said softly as he bowed his head while touching the seal. Both have seals on us that set us apart from everyone, and I learned one thing from watching him. He picked his head up and looked right at Kakashi. I learned how to break sacred seals, he said very seriously. Kakashi's eyes went blank with horror. Naruto, stop him. We will all be in danger if he breaks that seal, he said soullessly. Naruto eyed him for a moment and then turned to Konohamaru and told Kakashi. No, part of being a master is trusting in your students. You taught me that. I trust them. If things get out of hand, I'll stop it, he told him resolutely. Hayashi spoke up suddenly. I do not want my daughter fighting him if he could give her some deadly disease. Tsunade. Naruto's eyes turned his cold eyes on him and said, You have no say in the matter. Right now she isn't your daughter. She's my disciple. Hayashi was shocked by his words. Naruto turned back to Konohamaru and yelled, I hope there is a hell of a lot of chakra in that seal because my money is still on Hanabi beating you into the ground. Konohamaru and Hanabi both smiled honestly at him. That's okay. I'm like my master, even if get beaten into the ground, I'll just get back up and keep fighting, he told him. Naruto nodded his head at him and Konohamaru went through a long series of hand signs. Unseal, he said and placed his hand on his chest. The dark black symbol glowed faintly and disappeared into smoke. Red chakra started pouring out of his body as the lust of battle filled his eyes. Within moments the brilliant red chakra encased his whole body. He got into his fighting pose and Hanabi did the same when she saw he wasn't going berserk and he was still himself. Kotetsu was in the doorway well clear of them when he yelled. First match of the semifinals, Hanabi Hyuga vs Konohamaru SAB Air Zendaki. Fight! They charged each other with a straight-line punch. Their fists hit each other and created a very distinct loud shockwave sound that reverberated in the arena. Like thunder, Kakashi said in wonder as Naruto smiled. They smiled at each other and disappeared with blinding speed. The sound of thunder came again and again as they clashed at high speed. Hanabi's movements were graceful and beautiful as she caught Konohamaru's punch that was flying at her and used his forward momentum to land a hard elbow into his stomach. He went flying over her shoulder wildly and hit the wall in a cloud of dust. Instantly another cloud appeared as he shot out of the cloud to attack her again. He threw 4 kunais at her and came charging at her right behind them. Rotation! She yelled, deflecting the kunais and sent him flying into another wall only for him to instantly be on her again in another attack. After a long time of clashing in combat with her, he seemed to disappear. Konohamaru reappeared and had stopped suddenly with the red chakra burning around his body. Hanabi eyed him in a defensive pose and he put up the seal of the tiger. No more messing around. Shadow Clone Jutsu! He yelled and summoned 25 clones that surrounded her. They all charged her and some even got a few good shots in until she yelled. Rotation! She popped most of the clones and panted hard. Konohamaru waited a moment for her to catch her breath. He is giving her a breather. The chakra isn't making him mindless like the others of his clan, Kakashi said in surprise. Naruto smiled at him and said, with the Shadow Clone Jutsu he can burn up a hell of a lot of chakra very quickly. Let's try that again. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He summoned 50 clones this time and again she beat them with her rotation move. Again and again he did this. What's he doing? Isn't he getting it, that summoning clones isn't going to break her rotation move? Choji asked curiously while munching on potato chips. Very smart, he's trying to burn off that red chakra, Kakashi said to himself. Hanabi popped another batch of 50 clones and stopped to catch her breath. Good, it looks like that's the last of the tainted chakra. Now I can fight you for real, he said from across the arena as the dust settled from their intense combat. Me dot as well, she replied while breathing heavily as her sage marks receded. How can they keep going? They have been fighting for nearly 8 minutes burning up chakra like crazy, Kiba said in disbelief. That's Naruto's training I tell you, Sakura said in exasperation. Now to summon some clones I can actually use. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he said and 5 clones appeared. Byakugan, she yelled as the veins in her temples bulged. Konohamaru sent in only one at her. She charged the clone and gracefully moved out of the way of its punch. She landed a gentle fist strike on its chest and it popped. She kept charging the next 3 Konohamarus and took them down with a series of strikes without any of them landing a blow on her. She looked around at the empty field. Damn, I don't have any sage chakra left to sense him. Where did he and that last clone go? She thought. Her face went blank as she suddenly remembered how Naruto beat Neji all those years ago. Konohamaru exploded out of the ground under her holding a blue ball of whirling energy. Rasengan, he yelled. She tried to move away, but it was too late, he hit her fully in the back with his jutsu. She screamed in pain as it instantly cut a spiral pattern on her back and she fell to the ground panting. Konohamaru bent over panting and said, Kami, I'm tired. Hanabi's back was bleeding as she struggled to get onto all fours and right herself. It took her many moments to push herself upright. Once she was on her feet again, Lee said. She just got hit with the Rasengan, how can she still stand? That's the will of fire in her, my boy, Guy-sensei said and gave him the 2 thumbs up with his sparkling smile. Hanabi eyed him in hatred. I'm gonna get you for that one, she said through clenched teeth. Konohamaru picked himself up from his doubled over panting to see her charging right at him in high speed. Ah crap! You're still up, he said in exasperation as she got to him. Shadow of the Dancing Leaf, she yelled and kicked Konohamaru right in the jaw and sent him flying into the air. Rock Lee had one hand on Dai-sensei's head, shaking it back and forth violently as he was jumping up and down and pointing at her excitedly. She moved so fast that she disappeared. She reappeared, flying up with him at exactly the same speed as she started casting jutsus in rapid succession. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 clones appeared in a fighting pose. For Hanabi's 8 trigrams 64 palms. There was a great flash of movement as the 4 Hanabi beat the hell out of him for the entire time he was airborne. Konohamaru hit the ground with a heavy thud and didn't move while Hanabi landed on her feet and yelped in pain. She was favoring her right foot and she was covered with sweat and dirt. She had clearly hurt herself doing the Shadow of the Dancing Leaf move. Guy-sensei! Guy-sensei! Lee yelled while still violently shaking his head back and forth. Did you see? Did you see? She used the move I taught her. Guy snatched his head away from the overexcited ninja and yelled loudly into his ear. No, I didn't, because someone was shaking my head all around. Lee went rigid as he quivered back and forth for a second before falling over. The crowd was stunned at what she had just done, even Naruto, and it was silent for a moment as Hanabi panted in the ring. Finally, Kiba broke the silence by saying, "Holy shit, that was an insane move she just did." I'm glad she's Naruto's girlfriend because I don't think anyone else in the village could handle her. His shock was clearly written on his face as most of the crowd burst into laughter and laughed for a long time. Hayashi shielded his face from embarrassment after seeing his daughter use Lee's move. Konohamaru started to stir and the laughter instantly stopped. Erg! He curled into a ball from pain. Kami, I heard that all over, he said as he trembled and his breath came in sharp rasps. Hanabi was right next to him and gave him a sour look as he struggled onto all fours and fought to get back up. Once he managed to finally get back to his feet, Hanabi gave him a bitter scowl as he panted. Kami, Konohamaru, just stay down, she said as she reared back and punched him with all the strength she had left right in the face. The loud crack from the contact of the punch echoed in the arena as many people winched from the sound as Konohamaru flew back a few feet. He hit the ground, bounced a few times, he was out cold. She winched from the pain in her arm. Kotetsu came out of hiding and walked over to Konohamaru. He stared at him for a moment, then looked over at Hanabi in surprise. The winner is Hanabi Hyuga. The crowd exploded in applause. She was handed a vial to drink from an umbu. Drink this. It is the cure for the sickness that red chakra can cause. She wasn't even thinking when she downed the bottle. A look of utter disgust appeared on her face and she started gagging. I think I would have preferred the sickness. That is the worst tasting thing I've ever had. They brought out a stretcher and took Konohamaru away as Naruto went down to Hanabi. How do you feel? He said her carefully. Like hell, and I had to drink this awful potion. She complained at him. He sighed. No, I meant where are you hurt? He said with kindness in his voice. My right forearm and hand hurts. I've got a couple of broken ribs on my left side and I think I've shattered some bones in my left foot. She begrudgingly admitted while looking away from him. I think it's pointless to tell you that you shouldn't have tried Lee's move. Your body isn't conditioned for it. He told her kindly. Well, I know that now. She scolded him harshly. Kotetsu held up his hand to call for silence. Valiak has pulled out of the semi-final match, making Naruto the winner. We will be taking a short break so the medics can look over Hanabi before the final fight. He yelled loudly. Gee, I wonder why the poor guy pulled out of the fight? Choji said sarcastically. There is no need to take a break before the final fight. We are ready now, he said loudly. Hanabi gave him a questioning look and he whispered softly in her ear. Trust me. She looked at him nervously for a moment before nodding at the proctor in agreement. Hanabi limped over to the center of the ring with Naruto in front of Kotetsu. Hey, this isn't right. She hasn't even had time to rest and she's hurt, one spectator said. Yeah, you're right. She's in no condition to fight. Postpone the match. Another agreed. Hanabi looked awful. She was hardly holding herself upright. The back of her uniform was gone and she was still bleeding from the Rasengan she took. One of her eyes was swelling up and turning black. She was covered in sweat and was exhausted. She put her hands up in a poor excuse for a fighting pose as Kotetsu whispered to Naruto. You sure she's up for this? He leaned over and said to him. Just start the match. He gave him a disbelieving look as he held his hand up high in preparation to start the match. Sakura angrily said. I can't believe Naruto is still making her fight. I'm gonna clobber him after this match is over. Final fight. Naruto Uzumaki vs Hanabi Hyuga. Fight! He said as he threw his hand down. Naruto looked directly at Tsunade and then to Hayashi. Both of them had disapproving looks on their faces. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he said as one clone appeared. He then raised his hand over his head and said, I forfeit. Hanabi collapsed as Naruto rushed over to her and caught her before she hit the ground. He gently laid her on the ground and started healing her with a massive amount of chakra. Master, why did you forfeit? She asked while winching in pain. I will quote my sensei. Shinobi that abandon a mission are trash. Shinobi that abandon their teammates for a mission are worse than trash. In short, I forfeited so I could heal you as soon as possible. You couldn't get treatment until it was over or you would have forfeited your match with me," he said with concern in his voice. "He forfeits?" Kotetsu said it like he couldn't believe his ears. "Ladies and gentlemen, Naruto Uzumaki has forfeited, making Hanabi Hyuga the winner of the final match," he yelled loudly. Disbelief came across the crowd and the noise from everyone talking grew louder. Sakura stood up and cupped her hands around her mouth. She yelled loudly over the crowd. "Way to go, Hanabi! You took down great sage Naruto." Cheering started and grew louder and louder until it was defying. Even the Kages stood up and applauded her. The next day, Naruto was at the hospital sitting next to Hanabi's bed while she slept. She was so bandaged up that she looked like a mummy. Naruto was reading over an elemental jutsu scroll with a steaming cup of tea that was on the bedside table. Sakura came in with her white medic's coat on and a clipboard in hand. "How is our champion of the Chunnin exams, the one and only Hyuga clan's demon-fisted Hanabi?" Sakura asked with a playful smile. Naruto never took his eyes off his scroll and said, "She slept through the night without waking up." "Did you have a lot of trouble mending the bones?" "I guess you didn't know since you collapsed after healing her, but Tsunade healed her bones. It didn't take her long to heal the ribs, arms and hands, but it took her almost an hour for the foot." "You knucklehead. You put way too much chakra into your healing chakra when you healed her. Didn't Tsunade tell you that putting more chakra into it doesn't make the healing stronger, it only wastes chakra?" she said and then smiled. Someone was worried about their girlfriend. She said musically, clearly teasing him. He tossed her a sideways sarcastic look and said, "Your comment about her take me down after the fight didn't help. I've had several of the nurses res me about being beat up by my girlfriend/student." Sakura laughed even though she tried to stop herself. "I only said that because they weren't cheering for her after you forfeited. How was I supposed to know you were about to fall over from chakra exhaustion after healing her?" she said with a slight scornful look. "I don't suppose there is any news on Konohamaru?" he asked casually. Her eyes shifted back and forth before quietly saying, "I've already told you more than we both are supposed to know. He's still being held at a secret location by the Umbu, likely at some kind of medical facility." He nodded his head. "And it's deep underground," he said without emotion. Sakura gave him a puzzled look before asking, "How are you so sure that?" He gave her a flat look of annoyance before saying, "Because I'm a sage." He eyed her carefully for a long moment and she squirmed under his gaze. "Are you ever going to try to take on the slug sage training?" She looked away from him and admitted, "I never had my chakra animal tested and I'm happy where I am." "Are you so scared of sage training? Think of what Tsunade did when pain invaded. How many lives did she save?" He told her with emphatically. She looked away from him and said, "Naruto, not everyone wants to become the most powerful of their kind. What is wrong with becoming stronger?" he asked her in offense. "When it is 100 to 1 shot that you will not be turned into slug oil, then it's borderline suicide," she said as she looked away from him. Naruto sighed and said, "You can't look at sage training that way." Sakura cut him off and said, "Enough, Naruto. I'm not going through this with you again." He rolled his eyes at her and went back to reading. She looked over Hanabi and began writing on her clipboard. Hanabi started to stir and Naruto took her hand. Sakura said, "Hello, sleepyhead." She opened her eyes and moaned. "Naruto, is that you?" she said while looking in his direction. "Yes, I'm here." "How do you feel?" "I feel hot and groggy," she said as she tried to blink away her blurry vision and look herself over. "Did I really breaking that many bones?" "I'm bandaged head to toe," she asked in confusion as she looked at herself. "You broke quite a few, but nothing too serious. You should be able to go home later today, but no training for a while," Sakura said while she narrowed her eyes at Naruto. Hey! Even I'm not that cruel, he said in offense. She looked over at Sakura and asked, "Can I at least take the bandages off my head?" Sakura walked over to her and carefully sat her up. She gently removed the bandages. Hanabi had a black eye and her face looked paler than normal. "Feel better now?" she asked. "Yes, a little," she replied, and then turned to Naruto and asked, "How long will it be until I can go back to my sage training?" Sakura shook her head in exasperation and said, "I don't know why I ever expected something else to come out of her mouth when she's your student." "Not for a while, Hanabi. You still have to heal up first," Naruto said as he looked at her proudly. "How is Konohamaru? I bet he never tries to use the Rasengan on me again," she said and gave a short laugh before wincing in pain. "He's under Umbu guard somewhere, but he's fine from all indications. Tsunade will probably be by to give us an update eventually. By the way, he didn't use a full-strength Rasengan on you. He only used a stage 2 Rasengan. If he had used a full-strength one, then you might not have lived," he told her. Her face went blank. "You mean he was holding back? I fought my heart out to beat him and he was holding back?" she said in shock. Naruto gave her a chuckle and said, "Well, of course he was. If you kill your opponent during the match, you automatically fail." Hanabi eyed the bouquet of flowers on the bedside stand and said, "Ah, you got me flowers? That was sweet of you," Naruto said. "They aren't for me." He pulled off the card and handed it to her. She read it curiously. "From Gai Sensei and Rock Lee. Hope to see you train with us again sometime. P.S. Congratulations on winning at the Chunnin exams." She gave the card a sour look and said, "I'm not sure if I ever want to train with them again. My foot is still killing me." Her stomach suddenly growled loudly. She covered it and looked down in embarrassment. Naruto smiled at her and said, "I guess you're hungry? What does our little champion want to eat?" She thought about it and said, "Beetles on the half shell." Sakura gave her a revolted look while Naruto poked her gently in the forehead. "We aren't on the mountain anymore. You can have normal food, but if you really want beetles, I can go get some." Her eyes sparkled and she said, "Real food? I never hoped I would get to eat real food again." She wore a very longing look at him. "Yeah, how about some ramen?" he said with a big smile. Her face instantly went to a sour look and she flatly said, "How about no?" Naruto's face went blank as Sakura laughed at him. An hour later, Naruto was reading jutsu scrolls by Hanabi's hospital bed. Her bed was covered in different types of take-out boxes. She was eating some candies when Tsunade came in to check on her late that evening. "Naruto!" Tsunade scolded him. He almost dropped his scroll for the suddenness of her yelling. "Did you get that for her? You know that kind of food isn't allowed here." He looked over at her. "But we brought this kind of food here all the time for Choji," he said in confusion. She looked at him angrily and said, "Choji is an exception because he will not sit still otherwise." She walked up to Hanabi and cleared away the food boxes. "How are you feeling? Where does it hurt?" she asked her and then did a physical examination on her. "When can I go home?" Hanabi asked her after she finished examining her. You can go home now if you'd like, but you aren't going to be able to get around on your feet without crutches for a few weeks. I'm sure the Hyuga clan is anxious to see you after your fights in the Chunin exam. Your father has been very busy today, but he said that he'd try to come visit soon," she replied. Naruto's expression changed into a very serious and solemn expression as he walked up behind her and put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder. "Any news on Konohamaru?" Hanabi looked at the Hokage with a sad look. She took a deep breath and said, "The Umbu have him in isolation at their secret hospital. They are making him take medication and they are observing him to make sure he doesn't get sick. They are making sure all the red chakra is gone before releasing him." "What about the damage from the fight?" Is he hurt or anything? Hanabi asked, clearly worried. Her father walked in the door with a stern look. He walked right up to her and slapped down a folder in her lap. He looks like this, he said angrily. Hayashi. Tsunade scolded him. This was the urgent matter you had to attend to, going to visit Konohamaru? He pointed at the folder with an open hand. Go on, open it, he said. She opened the folder with her good hand and picked up one of the pictures. The first was of Konohamaru standing with nothing but a pair of boxer shorts on. There were large bruises over all his chakra points. The next picture was of his forearm up close, and the next was of his leg showing the bruises clearly. He scolded her. I told you this would happen if you built up your chakra levels too fast. You're losing your ability to use the gentle fist. Naruto put up a strained smile and said, Lord Hyuga, a few bruises isn't that big of a deal. Hayashi coldly told him. This is a Hyuga clan matter. You have no right to speak. Naruto eyed him coldly as Hayashi turned around and started scolding his daughter. Naruto said to himself quietly and very annoyed. A clan matter who? Tsunade was angry at Hayashi's actions, but said nothing when she saw what Naruto was doing. Naruto had bit his thumb and was slowly going through hand signs. You hardly behaved as a Hyuga during that fight out there, let alone the heir to the clan. You actually damaged the body while using your gentle fist like an amateur. How many times have I to? Naruto loudly yelled. Summoning jutsu. He slammed his hand onto the floor as a cloud of smoke filled the room. The smoke quickly faded away and Fukasaku was crouched down with a pair of pruning shears in his hand as he was looking over his left shoulder. No, you crabby old woman. I don't want centipedes with my earthworms today. He yelled so loudly that everyone's ears were ringing. He turned around and grabbed one of Hayashi's fingers like it was the branch of a shrub and held up his pruning shears. You? He said as he eyed the strange branch and then looked up to the outraged Hyuga lord. He wore a look of offense as he snatched his hand away from the wrinkly old toad. Hayashi looked him up and down. Fukasaku smiled innocently and said while rubbing the back of his head with the pruning shears. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that I had been summoned. He held out his hand. I'm fuck. I don't care who you are. Please leave. I am discussing a clan matter with my daughter. He cut him off coldly. The elder toad sage looked around at everyone and stared at Hanabi in shock. He jumped up and cracked Naruto over the head hard with his cane. Ouch! What was that for? How could you beat her up so badly during the exams? I thought I taught you better than that, he said as he cracked him over the head again. Naruto was holding his hands up defensively and yelled. Hey! It wasn't me. I swear. I forfeited to her so she could get medical attention faster. The elder toad sage was in mid-air about to crack him again and stopped. He landed lightly on the floor and said, Oh, sorry about that then. Why did you summon me? I feel no killing intent, so this can't be for combat, is it? That's debatable. Lord Hyuga is berating Hanabi and told me to stay out of it because it's a clan matter. So I summoned you, he said, rubbing the lumps on his head. He rubbed his chin and eyed him. I see, he said. I see. Well, if it's a clan matter then I guess I should be present. Please continue, he said respectfully as he set his cane down in front of him and placed both his hands on top of it. Hayashi shook his head in surprise before looking back at Hanabi and said, The gentle fist art is used to attack a opponent chakra network without harming the body. If you harm the body then you leave marks that the enemies might be able to decipher and figure out what kind of ninja attacked them. You look like a bumbling oaf out there. A sudden gust of wind knocked Lord Hyuga to the floor. It seems a bit drafty in here, the elder toad sage said casually. Hayashi quickly got to his feet in anger. How dare you use a jutsu on me? Do you even know who I am? You need a lesson in manners. The toad eyed him carefully and said, You need a lesson in humility. You seem quite proud of your taijutsu. Let's have a little sparring match to see whose taijutsu is stronger. I have no time for a wrinkled old toad today, he said coldly. The toad elder smiled at him and said, Oh, that's funny, you thought I was giving you a choice in the matter. He croaked a watery laugh and suddenly disappeared as Lord Hyuga flew through the open window. The elder landed from his flying jump kick and darted through the window and out into the street. Tsunade was clearly amused as she was giggling, but trying to hide it. Naruto gently picked up a very worried Hanabi into his arms as everyone went outside to see the fight that was about to take place. The white-haired Fukasaku was only wearing a gray robe and was standing 20 feet away from a prone and very annoyed Hyuga Lord. Hayashi quickly got to his feet and got into his taijutsu form as the people in the street backed away from them. I thought I should call the Umbu to deal with you. By all means call all the Umbu you want. Most of them wouldn't dare touch me, the elder frog said with his hands up as he shrugged. Hayashi eyed him coldly and said, As I was saying, but I feel if you want to see our clan's gentle fists so badly, then I'll give you a demonstration. Byakugan, he said as his temples bulged. He was momentarily blinded from the amount of chakra in the tiny toad's body. Fukasaku smiled as he charged him and hit him in the shin, then thigh, and did a leaping uppercut that hit him in chin. Before Hayashi barely started to rise from the strikes as he did a midair roundhouse kick that sent him flying back 15 feet. Everything happened in less than an eye blink. Naruto carefully set Hanabi down on the short wall around the hospital next to the Hokage and took a seat next to her. Tsunade asked Naruto, You think he stands a chance? Naruto crunched up his lips and slowly shook his head back and forth while watching Hayashi. Tsunade laughed while throwing her head back. This is going to be great then, she said loudly. Lord Hyuga picked himself up out of the street for the second time. It seems I was unprepared for your attack. That will not happen again, he said as he got back into a fighting pose. The toad elder chuckled softly and said, For someone that can see the chakra in someone's body, you're not very smart. He charged him again and Hayashi yelled, Rotation! Fukasaku was so fast that he moved in between his spinning chakra points and landed a hard strike to his midsection. He laid him out flat as Hayashi panted, trying to catch his breath that had been stolen from him. The toad elder reappeared standing on his chest while crouching down toward his face. Hayashi clearly saw the blinding chakra flowing in and out of the small toad in perfect harmony. He struggled to pick his head up and said through bloody clenched teeth, Who and what are you? The old toad laughed and said, Oh, now you ask. He stuck out his hand offering a handshake and happily said, I'm Fukasaku, the elder toad sage and the acting leader of the Toad clan. It's nice to meet you, he said with a big smile. Hayashi strained to say, So you're a toad sage, it is no wonder. I wasn't a match for you. He strained his body to raise his hand to meet his as was expected of a noble. The elder gripped him and hard. Hayashi winced from his strength and the elder said, I'm the Toad clan's toad sage. He eyed him coldly as he turned his head and nodded to Naruto. Shit, this is gonna take a lot of chakra, he thought, as far away at the Hokage training ground 7 of his clones that were charged with sage chakra poofed. He hummed with sage chakra. He stood up and bit him thumb again. He slowly went through the hand size and yelled, Summoning Jutsu! Toads of every shape and size appeared on every ledge top and open area around them. Fukasaku stuck his cane right in front of Hayashi's nose and said, This is the Toad clan, he said as Naruto panted heavily as he fought to keep standing. Each one of them is ready to lay down their life to protect another member, even our newest member. Hanabi, he warned the Hyuga Lord. And we don't like the idea of you berating one of our members. I've already died once for your village and I'm prepared to do it again if anyone from the Toad clan calls me in their time of need, he said with defying resolve. Hayashi was stunned at the sheer amount of toads and their size as he gazed around. You should remember this, only 4 humans in the last 100 years have been accepted into the Toad clan. Minato, who became the 4th Hokage, Jiraiya, who became one of the legendary Sannin and was offered the job of Hokage, Naruto, who is the hero of the 5 nations, and not 2 weeks ago your daughter joined us. I'd say our record speaks for itself on what caliber of ninjas we produce," he said as he removed his cane from the Hyuga Lord's face. "I see. My apologies for insulting a member of your clan, but everyone in the Hyuga clan is also ready to lay down their lives for her as well. She will one day take over as the acting head of the clan, and she cannot do that if she loses her gentle fist art that we are known for," he strained to say. "You have nothing to worry about. Her gentle fist is stronger than ever. When she used it on Naruto when she was in Sage mode, she never left a mark on his body." The small toad turned and jumped off of him as high as she sat up. "Thank you. I can't tell you how relieved that makes me. I guess I did need a lesson in humility. Here my daughter went from an average Hyuga ninja into a renowned one, and all I did is berate her. She even won the final match of the Chunnin exams, and I didn't even congratulate her. What kind of father have I become?" he said, clearly ashamed of himself. Fukasaku looked back at him and said, "The kind that worries too much about his clan's future and his daughter. Have some trust in her master." Hayashi slowly pulled himself upright while holding his thigh. "Your hands are harder than steel. Even my guy's hands aren't that hard. You must have devoted a lot of time into your training." The toad gave him a thoughtful expression and said, "When you are over 800 years old you have nothing but time." "I see. I was clearly outmatched then," Hayashi said with an almost laugh. He turned to Hanabi and said sincerely, "I'm sorry for the way I acted. Congratulations, I'm very proud of you. The clan will be expecting you. They will want to hear all about your training." He bowed to them. Hanabi was mildly shocked as she watched her father turn around and limp away. Fukasaku headed over to Naruto, who was clearly tired from the last summoning jutsu he preformed. "Where's Shima?" he asked Naruto. Naruto panted, "Good grief! I summoned everyone but her and the Grand Geezer, and all you have to say is where's Shima? You're a slave driver." The Toad Sage laughed at him and said, "Well, I had to punish you for summoning me for such a petty reason. I thought that running down your chakra levels was a good punishment. I look forward to seeing you both in a few months," he said as the entire area was covered in smoke. When it cleared, the Toad clan was gone as well as Lord Hyuga. Hanabi looked over at Naruto in dread and said, "They didn't take father with them, did they?" Naruto looked over at her blankly and then busted up laughing. "No, but that would have been so funny if they did." "Then where is he?" she asked with concern in her voice. "You tell me. Don't you have any sage chakra in you to sense him?" he asked her, suddenly quite serious. She closed her eyes and concentrated for a moment before reopening her eyes. "I don't have any sage chakra right now. I'm hurting and the medication is hindering me from gathering any," she said. He's on his way back to the Hyuga compound under a hinge," he replied. "You think he's going to be mad at me?" she said worriedly. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and casually said, "Who cares? He had it coming for yelling at you like that in a hospital when you're hurt. It's not like he was perfect in his first real fight." She eyed him curiously and asked, "How would you know that?" He gave her a very understanding look as he leaned over to her. "Because no one ever is," he told her kindly. Tsunade stood up in a cheerful mood and said, "I've got some other people to look in on before heading back to the office. You two should go home for the day." "Okay, Tsunade-kun. Are you ready to go home?" he asked Hanabi with a smile. She hung her head. "Can't we stay here a bit longer? I'd rather let father cool off before going home," she said in a reserved manner. Naruto gave her a very honest and sweet look as he quietly said, "I said home, not the Hyuga compound." Flashback. "Come on, Hanabi, I'll take you home," Niji said from up the walkway. Hanabi turned around and looked at her cousin through her puffy swollen eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Niji. I can't go with you," she said while wiping her tears on her sleeve. Niji gave her a confused look. "I already am home," she stated with resolve. And a flashback. She smiled at him shyly and said, Yes, master." They arrived home and took their shoes off at the door. Shizen came into the living room wearing a smile and said, "Welcome back. I heard you were the last person standing at the Chunnin exams. Congratulations." Hanabi gave her a weak smile while holding herself up with her crutches and said, "Thanks, Shizen. The clan is planning a celebration party for you tonight." "I can't wait," she said excitedly. Hanabi had a look of dismay on her face and asked, "Can't we push that back? I'm really not feeling up for it today." Shizen gave her a sad look and said, "If we push it back, a few of the Sand Village guests are going to miss it. Even the Kazekage was going to come." She sighed and looked at the ground before saying, "I guess I can't miss it then. I am the heiress after all." Naruto was slowly helping Hanabi up the gates of the Hyuga compound when the gate guards smiled and greeted her. "Hello, Sage Naruto and Hanabi. The party has already started, you two are some of the last ones to get here." He held the gate open for her. It took them a while to make it to the 5-story tall Hyuga castle-like building with her using crutches, but they made it. The door was propped open and several Hyugas at the door clapped for her when she came inside. "Hey, the champion is here," one of them said. "Congratulations, both of you," another said as she slowly made her way inside. Cheers and applause erupted from the packed living room that had been cleared to hold the party. The entire Hyuga clan was there as well as Sakura, Guy, Lee, Matsuri, and Kazekage Gaara. There was a table with food and drinks set out for the guests, and there was live music being played in the corner by several musicians. Hanabi made the rounds and greeted all her clansmen first before talking to their friends. "Hanabi, your fight with Konohamaru was so invigoration," Lee said enthusiastically with his fist in front of him beside Guy, who was smiling. "That it was Hanabi. They are calling you the Demon Fist of the Hyuga clan now." "Good job," he said with his 2 thumbs up and gleaming smile. Sakura smiled at them and said, "I hope you're feeling better. Let me know if you need any treatment tonight. I got off early to come here just in case." Hanabi smiled back at her and said, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine at the moment." After a while of talking to everyone, it suddenly became very quiet. The Hokage was at the entrance with the most unlikely of guests. Konohamaru was next to her with an awkward smile. Hanabi's face went blank in disbelief. "Konohamaru," she said with her hand covering her mouth, clearly relieved that he was okay. He smiled even bigger and walked up to her. She threw down her crutches and gave him a big hug when he approached her. Are you okay now?" she asked as she let him go. He laughed. "Yup, I'm fine. They gave me a clear bill of health. I'm free of the chakra thanks to you," he told her while smiling. Everyone in the room seemed to breathe a sigh of relief at this news, and everyone went back to enjoying the party. Hanabi scowled at him. "You held back during our fight," she accused him. He gave her a confused look and said, "How? I fought you with everything I had, and even still you put a whooping on me that I'll never forget. You didn't use a full-strength Rasengan on me," she said while still scowling. He gave her a strained look with his hands defensively out in front of him and said, "Of course not. I didn't want to kill my favorite sparring partner. And after what you did to me, I don't think I'll ever try using it on you again." Everyone laughed at him. Naruto came up and put his hand on his shoulder. "I guess I see now why you would never take your shirt off in front of me," he said with a smile. "Yeah. Sorry for keeping that from you. It was supposed to be my ace in the hole for the last match. I wanted to have you expel the cursed chakra from me, but it seems like Hanabi was more than enough to do it," he said apologetically. Hanabi smiled at him. "Ah, don't worry, I'll beat the hell out of you whenever you want me to." She teased him. He laughed and said, "Don't get too overconfident, Miss Crutches. When I finish my sage training, let's have another match to see who's stronger." She laughed again. "Sure, I'll look forward to it." Sakura curiously asked him, "So how did your clan get the name Sarutobi?" "Oh, that. It was actually the second Hokage's nickname for my grandfather. He always used to jump around a lot when he was younger, and the second Hokage thought he looked like a monkey. They made it his last name to keep everyone else from finding out about his clan," he said with a smile. Naruto suddenly wore a serious look and asked him quietly, "What about Asuma Jr.?" He looked at him kindly. He wasn't pure-blooded and thankfully wasn't born with the red chakra. Naruto relaxed and a smile returned to his face. "So everything is back to normal," Hanabi said. Konohamaru wore a so look on his face and said, "Mostly, but a few older people sneered at me when we were walking here." On the bright side, he turned to look at Naruto. "Your chakra level has nearly doubled," Naruto said, and Konohamaru put on a slightly annoyed face. "Hey, I wanted to be the one that said it," he yelled playfully as his friend giggled. "The seal that was on me fed off my own chakra to keep the red chakra held back. Now my chakra isn't fighting against itself. Maybe I'll be like my grandfather and master jutsu with ease," he said as he rubbed under his nose. Naruto casually waved both his hands at him and, "Nah, you'll be the same screw-up you always were," he said, clearly teasing him. Konohamaru laughed loudly. The party was winding down and Naruto led Hanabi outside the Hyuga castle after saying good night to Lord Hyuga. Matsuri and Gaara were waiting for them. "Congratulations, you two. Well done on completing the Chunnin exams," Gaara said as Matsuri took a timid step toward Naruto and bowed. "Thank you for teaching me, great sage. I think I finally understand what Gaara meant when he said the reason he didn't think he could beat you had nothing to do with your jutsu. I think I understand now what he meant after fighting you," she said as she stood back up. He smiled at her and said, "It's my guts. That's why you couldn't win." She smiled back at him seriously while shaking her head back and forth slowly, then looked over at Hanabi and then back to him. "No, it's not your guts. It's your heart," she said sweetly. "Hey Matsuri," Hanabi said in a playful but warning manner, "keep your eyes to Gaara. Naruto's all mine." She smiled and held her hands up and took a step back, pretending to be reserved. "Of course. I don't want to get whacked in the head by one of your crutches," she said, and even Gaara managed a light laugh. "We need to be getting back home. It is almost midnight," Naruto told them. "We need to get going as well. We leave tonight to return to our village," Gaara said respectfully. Naruto gave him a curious look and said, "So you are all better?" He nodded his head and said, "Yes, thanks to the Leaf Village I will live longer and fulfill my duties as Kazekage as best as I can for some time to come. I guess that's 3 life debts I owe the Leaf now." Naruto put on a sincere and serious look as he rested his hand on Gaara's shoulder and said, "No, Gaara. You just being alive to give me hope is worth more than 1,000 life debts to me." Gaara wore the same look and said, "I feel the same way about meeting you. Good night, my friend. I hope to see you again soon." It took Naruto and Hanabi almost 30 minutes to get home when it normally only took 10 minutes. He opened the door for her and took off her shoes for her. He led the sleepy Hyuga to the stairs and encountered a problem. "Crap, I can't have her sleeping upstairs in her condition. Oh well, I guess I'll just disable the traps in my room. It's not like they would hurt her away with as far into her sage training as she is, but I'll do it just in case," he thought. He led her into his bedroom and tucked her into his small bed. She was asleep almost instantly. He turned to walk away and then turned back and stared at her for a long moment. He quietly walked back over to her and kneeled down. He kissed her gently on her forehead and said, "Good night, Demon Fist Hanabi, my most precious toad disciple. he said softly, and then quietly left the room and closed the door behind him. Naruto was exhausted from burning up so much chakra over the last few days and decided to actually sleep that night. He went out into the living room and stood in front of Hanabi's favorite white sofa. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he whispered as 14 clones appeared and piled onto the furniture to go to sleep. He stretched and yawned and then curled up on the white sofa. His clones fell asleep quickly, but he didn't. It was hard for him to sleep when he did it so rarely. Naruto stretched out his legs on the sofa and stared at the ceiling. The light from the outside lamps was coming through the aquarium on the bay window and scattered an array of lights on the ceiling in the patterns of shifting water. He watched the lights for a long time while thinking over all the things that had happened over the last few weeks. He remembered training Hanabi on the sacred Toad's Mountain. He remembered her fighting Takia. He remembered the amazing string of jutsus she used on Konohamaru when she sealed his chakra in mid-air. He remembered the elder Toad Sage giving her father a lesson in humility. Naruto was lost in his nostalgia as a memory came to him that he hadn't thought of in a long time. He remembered the time when he was fighting Gaara and he helped henge Gamabunta into the nine-tailed fox. He remembered how elegant and fierce he was in that form. Ruby, he thought. Memory after memory came to him of how many times Ruby had healed him. Memories of her helping him fulfill his Nindo when he could not. When he was out of chakra, Ruby would always give him some of hers so he could keep his Nindo. Naruto looked through his past memories again and he felt humbled by all the times she helped him. He again remembered the words he had always wanted to tell her, but the village's perception on the nine-tailed fox had tainted his thoughts so long ago with their hatred of her because of Madara. Because he was her cage and those that tried to harm her by beating on that cage only harmed him. She in turn became the protector of that cage and protected him by healing him and keeping him safe. Ruby, he said into his mind. He instantly felt Kyuubi's dark eyes on him. What do you want? She asked him with the slightest hint of surprise in her voice. Ruby, I'm sorry, and thank you for everything, he told her as he nodded off to sleep. Kyuubi sat in his mind for a long time thinking. What a strange thing for a mortal so say to me. 2 weeks later, Naruto came into his own bedroom to wake Hanabi. He shook her gently and said, "Wake up, please." She snored loudly, clearly still asleep. He shook her harder and yelled, "Hey, wake up!" She snored louder and rolled over and covered her head with her pillow. Naruto shook his fist at her in frustration, wishing he had Kakashi's thunder crack ability to create thunder at will. He sighed loudly and collapsed to his knees as he rested his forehead on the bed in exasperation. "Come on, please wake up. It's almost 10 and the Hokage has summoned us," he begged her. She rolled over and sleepily opened her eyes as she groaned before sitting up in bed. "The Hokage?" she said clearly, not awake yet. "Yeah, as in the leader of the village. It wouldn't be very noble to be late," Naruto said, and she instantly woke up. "We've been summoned?" she said in surprise. Naruto nodded his head at her and said, "Yes, we have. This is about the time for the Chunnin exam results to come. Out. Get dressed so we can go." She grabbed the set of clothes her handler had left at the foot of the bed for her. She went across the hall to shower and get dressed. Naruto waited by the door as Hanabi nervously came up to him. "You ready?" he asked her. "Yes, master," she replied nervously. He took her by the hand and led her across town. "You don't need to be so stiff. Even if you didn't make Chunnin this time, they are holding another exam in 6 months," he told her kindly. She wrung her hands and looked over at him. "Yes, that's true, but after the clan threw me that party, I'd feel like I let them down if I didn't pass." He put his hand on her shoulder. "I didn't pass my first time either, and you had much harder fights than me this time," he said as they were walking up the steps of the Hokage Tower. As they came to the top, they saw Konohamaru leaning on the railing outside the Hokage's office, looking bored. "Kami, you two are slow. I'm dying to know the results and you two decide to sleep in," he said loudly. Naruto gave Hanabi a flat, knowing look that she shrank back from slightly. Only one of us slept in, he said knowingly. Konohamaru looked at Hanabi. How's your foot? It's fine now, I hope Tsunade will let me start training again soon. I still keep it wrapped up for support though, she told him. The Umbu at the door cleared his throat loudly and said, The Hokage will see you now. He opened the door for them. They filed in and Konohamaru and Hanabi stood in front of Naruto. Tsunade put down her paperwork and leaned back in her chair while she crossed her arms. You all are late, she told them flatly. That's my fault then. I take responsibility for my students. I couldn't get Hanabi up this morning. Her medicine makes her sleepy in the morning, Naruto said innocently. She gave them a long sigh and turned to Hanabi. I will now announce the results of the Chunnin exams, she said. Hanabi, in your fight with Takia you showed great restraint and perception. You always kept planning your next move even when he had you up against the wall. You never lost your level-headed composure. This is a vital skill for a Chunnin. She turned to Konohamaru and scowled at him. In your first fight you blindly ran through poison needles, revealed a village secret and showed no skill or tactics at all, she said as he hung his head in shame. She looked kindly at both Konohamaru and Hanabi and said, But when you two fought each other, Konohamaru, when you asked her to enter Sage Mode because you wanted to fight her at her strongest, she said as she turned to Hanabi. When you entered Sage Mode and shocked all the 5 nations because they saw a 15-year-old girl enter the pinnacle fighting state of the ninja world. When you two clashed in combat that was far above what Genin should be able to do. When you gave Hanabi breathers during your match so she could keep going even when that red chakra was driving you on to fight. The way you two worked together to expel that red chakra, you two showed everyone what teamwork, determination and guts was all about. She smiled at them and proudly said, You both made the rank of Chunnin, but just by 1 vote for you Konohamaru. Hanabi you passed with flying colors, she added quickly. All 3 of them smiled as Naruto put his hands on both their heads and said, Congratulations, both of you. Konohamaru and Hanabi were both so happy and Naruto's face showed that he was very proud of them both. The smile faded from Tsunade's face as she solemnly said, Naruto. He looked over at her and put up a weak smile like he knew what she was about to say. I have some bad news for you, you didn't make the rank of Chunnin, she said sadly. Naruto hung his head and shook it back and forth. His look clearly said I knew it. It's okay. What's most important to me is my students and they passed, he said with a smile. Hanabi smiled and cheerfully said, Don't worry about it, master. I won't boss you around too much. She pretended to punch him, but pushed him playfully instead. And I've got even more news you're not going to like. Kakashi is officially retiring from Squad 7, and a new Jonin instructor will be taking over, Tsunade said with a long sigh, and Naruto picked his head up in shock. But, what a... Tsunade held up her hand to quiet him and said, During your fight with Matsuri you ran roughshod over her. You berated her and you used a jutsu so big you caught the entire throat in it. This was very irresponsible. Yet just like Gaara said, you changed her during that fight as only you could. You embedded your dream of becoming a Kage into her, just like you did to me and Gaara. That day I saw a man, with the highest rank in the land, admit that the person he most wanted to be like was a Genin from the Leaf Village. Your next opponent forfeited after seeing your jutsu's power and you lost another opportunity to show off your skills. Then you forfeited to your student just so she could receive medical attention as soon as possible. You gave up your last chance to make Chunnin to help your student. These are not the actions of a Chunnin. Your results were not voted on by the Proctor's Council. The 5 Kages themselves made the vote. You were judged not only on your results, but of those of your students as well, she said as she turned to Hanabi and said, I'm sorry Hanabi, but it doesn't look like you will get to boss around your master. She turned back to a very confused Naruto and said, The council of the 5 Kages agreed unanimously that you were already well past the rank of Chunnin and that you were already a great Jonin instructor," she said with a big smile. Naruto was stunned for a moment before smiling back to her and asked, "You mean the new Jonin leader of Squad 7 is me?" She smiled at him and said, "Yes, I'd hoped you'd take the job." Naruto could hardly believe what he was hearing as Hanabi said, "Ah, too bad, I was looking forward to bossing you around." "Congratulations, master." Konohamaru put his hand on the stunned Naruto's shoulder and said, "Way to go, boss. You're one step closer to becoming Hokage." Tsunade let them talk for a few moments before Naruto asked, "Can we leave now? I need to treat my students to lunch to celebrate." He smiled at his students. Tsunade gave him a small, honest smile and said, "There's more good news for you, Naruto." He smiled at her in confusion and asked, "What could be better than making me Jonin instructor of Squad 7? She took in a deep breath and said words that stunned him to his core. "You got approval from the High Council." The smile instantly faded from his face as he looked at her in blank shock. What did you just say?" he asked soullessly in disbelief. "You got approval from the High Council," she said again much slower than before with a smile on her face. Hanabi wore a look of confusion while Konohamaru was staring at him with a look of disbelief and awe. A joyous smile appeared on his face and he disappeared. Tsunade's paperwork was scattered in every direction as he reappeared crouching on her desk holding her by the shoulders. "Say it again," he asked her intently. Tsunade reached up and grabbed him on both sides of his face while pulling him in close and yelled loudly, "You got approval from the High Council." Naruto stood up and began giggling as the wind picked up around him, sending the papers flying around him in a mini cyclone. His giggle became a quiet laugh and soon he was laughing hard with all his might. "Away with you! Don't send my paperwork across the whole village," she said playfully while still smiling at him. He held a kunai to his chest and disappeared. A cyclone appeared on top of the Hokage monument. All three of them watched it appear from the bay window in the Hokage's office. It barely touched the ground, but widened at a huge rate once it reached the clouds. It covered the skies for miles and stripped the clouds from the heavens. This cyclone made the one he summoned at the Chunin exam look like a tiny dust twister. Even over the great roar of the wind a single Jonin's voice could be heard for miles. "Woo-woohoo!" Naruto yelled from the eye of his cyclone. Tsunade just shook her head while smiling. At least he did it so he wouldn't damage the village. Hanabi looked over at the Hokage in confusion. Why is he so happy, Hokage-sama? What is this approval all about? Konohamaru blankly looked over at her in shock and said, "It means that when Tsunade retires from being Hokage that he will be one of the people the council looks to become the next Hokage." She stared at the Hokage blankly. You mean he's going to become the 6th Hokage? But what about my sage training?" she asked Tsunade worriedly. She smiled over at her and said, "I'm not retiring from being Hokage anytime soon. You have nothing to worry about with your training. Also, there is another person on my list of successors. The High Council will choose between him and Kakashi when the time comes." She leaned over to her and said, "But off the record, Kakashi said he'd rather see Naruto become Hokage after filling in for me one time." "That's very true," Kakashi said from on top of the overhanging bay window eave as he marveled at Naruto's cyclone. Naruto was sitting at a small plain table while Sasuke poured them tea. "I heard about your cyclone yesterday," he said quietly. Naruto smiled to himself in embarrassment. "Yeah, I guess I kind of overreacted," he said. Sasuke smiled at him genuinely. "Not at all. You have been chasing this dream all your life. It's only natural you reacted the way you did when found out." Naruto scratched the back of his head innocently and said, "But I set off alarms all over the village when I summoned that much wind. Hell, there was 30 umbu around me when I let go of that jutsu. They thought someone was attacking the village." Sasuke laughed softly. I wasn't worried when I heard the wind. I knew it was you," he said as he took a sip of tea. "How is your disciple's recovery coming along?" he asked. Tsunade said she could start some light training and she should be completely recovered by next week. Konohamaru is free of the red chakra and will be going back to train with the monkey clan soon, he told him. Sasuke nodded his head and said, "That chakra seal came as a surprise even to me. It's no wonder you two became such good friends all those years ago. To have shared such similar circumstances and not know it until much later on. What will you do now?" Naruto took a long deep breath and said, "Well, once Hanabi is better we will take a journey to Mount Maiboku on foot. After we reach the Toad village I will continue her sage training." Sasuke nodded his head and said, "And after you complete her training?" Naruto sighed as he hung his head. "I don't think I'll ever truly complete her training with the time I have left, but I will train her with all the time I have. At least until it's time for me to leave." Sasuke knew exactly what he meant by time for him to leave. "So have you made preparations for your fight with Kyuubi?" he asked. Naruto nodded his head silently before saying, "Yes, I have. I spoke with Gaara about a suitable battlefield to fight the nine-tailed fox on. He told me when the time comes I can use the heart of the desert for our fight. He said nothing can live there and there's nothing for 50 miles around. He said it would be an ideal place for the battle. I've given him one of my kunai markers and he's going to get one of his squads to bury it in heart of the desert." Sasuke gave him a curious expression before saying, "What if when the seal starts to break to a degree that you are unable to use that jutsu?" He sighed again. "Then I guess I'll have to walk there," he replied. Sasuke smiled at him. "You never will give up. There isn't another ninja I could ever see trying to walk for 4 days out into the desert with a breaking Jinchuriki seal but you. How much of this does the Hokage know?" he asked. He looked over at him and replied, "Only that I'm planning on fighting the Kyuubi. It's a pretty touchy subject for her. She doesn't want me to fight the Kyuubi, but there is no other choice. She is in denial about the whole matter. She really does think of you as her son. I can see how you both feel. I think you are handling this as best you can right now," he said, taking another sip of tea. His shoulders slumped and he said, "Yeah, but I still have to figure out the lightning element. Without it the Moon Sage's jutsu is useless." Sasuke set his cup down and asked, "How good of a blacksmith do you think Tenten is?" Naruto was totally caught off guard by this question. "Well, she's the best in the village, but what does that have to do with anything?" He tilted his head slightly at him and asked, "Do you still have the broken pieces of the second Hokage's sword?" Naruto thought about where he was going with it and said carefully, "Yes, I do, but they aren't technically mine. Even if it was possible to reforge the sword, there are no accounts of it producing the amount of lightning I need for the jutsu. Besides, even if Tenten reforged it we would need a master of the lightning element to enchant it using a special jutsu. A jutsu that's likely locked away in the Senju vault under the Hokage tower. Do you think you can get the jutsu?" he asked him. "I can probably convince Tsunade to let me try to get it, but we would still need a master of the lightning element that could sustain something on the level of your lightning bomb attack for a period of time." Suddenly Naruto's face went slack as he saw what Sasuke was getting at. You'll help me reforge the sword? Can you even hold that jutsu for 10 minutes? He stuttered. Sasuke grinned at him. "How much chakra can you pump into me with that forbidden jutsu of yours?" Naruto was dumbfounded. But even if I get it reforged, how will it help me learn the lightning element?" "If you can't make lightning yourself, then you can get it from somewhere else and learn to manipulate it. At the very least you will have stacked another ninja tool in your favor over Kyuubi," he said wisely. Naruto and Hanabi were at training ground 36 near at the stream that ran through the back of the wooded field. "Okay, you've got the basics of summoning down. I want you to slowly go through the hand signs and give it a try. Remember to call them like you are calling for help in your most dire time of need," he said. She nicked her hand with a kunai and slowly went through the hand signs with her eyes closed. Summoning jutsu, she said loudly, and she slammed her hand into the ground. There was a small puff of smoke, and when it cleared, a tadpole? All that chakra and all I got was this? She said, holding up a small black tadpole by the tail in disgust. Even Konohamaru summoned a 2-foot-tall monkey that could at least talk, she said in disbelief. Naruto slumped his shoulders. Against my better judgment, I'll tell you this. Raichi isn't one of the lower members of the monkey clan. She let the tadpole go in the stream and then turned a confused face on him. How high up is Raichi? She asked him carefully. He scratched the back of his head, wearing a strained face. He's on the monkey clan's elder council. She wore a blank look of shock until it turned into an angry, curious look. You mean to tell me Konohamaru summoned the equivalent of Fukasaku his first time? Naruto stuck his hands out in a defensive pose at the angry Hyuga and said in a strained voice. I'm not exactly sure how the monkey clan is structured, but it looks like it. How? How could he do that? She yelled at him. Don't know. It took me 3 weeks and the chakra of Kyuubi to summon Boss Toad. I guess it's because he's more like the third Hokage than we thought, he said. She angrily scowled, continued as she went back over to the stream and started her training with renewed vigor. She summoned for 4 hours straight and was still getting nothing but tadpoles. Naruto only had to refill her chakra levels twice during the whole training session. Hanabi was hardly standing, she was so worn out. She was panting and covered in sweat when Naruto told her, Okay, it's time to go home and get some dinner. I want to keep going, but my arm is just too tired and I don't have much chakra left, she said as she leaned on his shoulder for support. He smiled as he sighed at how hard she trained. What do you want for dinner? He asked her softly. I want a bath and a kiss, she said absent-mindedly in her tiredness. Naruto's eyes suddenly turned very sad. She looked up at him when she saw they weren't moving and snapped to attention. Ops, I can't believe I said that. He doesn't know that I heard his thoughts while he was on the back of the stone frog in sage mode. I'm so stupid. Why did I say that? She lamented in her thoughts. 2 men, a bath and clams, she added quickly. Naruto covered his sad look with a smile and innocently said, We will have to see what my clone brings back from fishing. All right, she said uncomfortably while wearing a fake smile. The short walk home was strangely silent. They entered the front door and Hanabi said, Shizen, we are home. I'm in the kitchen prepping dinner, she said from the kitchen. They walked into the kitchen where she had water boiling and she was chopping up vegetables. She turned from her work to look at them. Hanabi, you look dreadful, go get cleaned up for dinner. Hanabi looked at herself and smelled her uniform. She wrinkled her nose up in displeasure. I see your point. I'll head down the hall and take a bath, she said. Hanabi, she said, calling her back. Actually, while you two were away, I got the shower fixed in the main bedroom. You can clean yourself up there. Hanabi smiled at her and said, Thank you, Shizen. She headed upstairs to get cleaned up. So how was her summoning training today? She asked him as she worked on dinner. You know you didn't have to take over making dinner. I can make a clone to do it, he said as he crossed his arms and leaned on the door frame of the kitchen entrance. She smiled at him and said, Frankly, I've been bored to tears here and doing some of the housework will keep me busy. I don't mind, I actually enjoy cooking. He grinned slightly at her and said, Well, I can't say I mind. You're a way better cook than mine, judging from the lunch you made us. She glanced over at him and said, I'm glad the two of you enjoyed it. I hope you didn't hork it down at top speed though. Naruto shook his head at her and said, No, we took our time. I was using the lunch break to teach her about the Toad Clan laws and tell her some of our stories. That's good to hear, she said as the front door opened and Naruto's fishing clone came back with the day's catch. He dumped the fish in the aquarium next to the stove and said, Not the best catch for today. All I caught was some yellowtails. I hooked a swordfish today, but it broke the line," it said in a disappointed manner. The clone looked over at Shizen and asked, "Have you ever heard of a swordfish swimming this far upriver? I mean, they are a saltwater fish, aren't they?" She looked up in thought and said, "Actually, yes, I have. Lord Hyuga caught one in the southern river when he took Hanabi fishing for her 5th birthday. It wasn't very big though, maybe 4 pounds. We ate it at her birthday dinner with the catfish she caught." The fishing clone nodded its head, then dissipated in a puff of smoke. "It's still odd to see one so far from salt water," Naruto said with a curious look on his face. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "Well, next time you go out to eat with the Hokage at that restaurant on the docks, why don't you ask the ship captain about it while you are there?" He nodded his head and said, "I think I will. Thanks for the idea." "You're welcome," she said as she took the fish out and put them into the sink to clean it. "I'll set the table," Naruto said as he got out the plates. A short while later, Hanabi came back downstairs smelling much better in clean clothes. She took her seat by Naruto and started telling Shizen about her daily training. Shizen asked Naruto, "How long do you think it will be before she can summon a real toad?" Naruto finished his bite of food and said, "Depends on the toad she wants to summon. If you're talking about a normal-sized forest toad, probably a few weeks with her chakra control. Now if you're talking about summoning one of the fighting class Toad clan members, it will take a lot longer for her. We still need her doing more chakra building exercises. Summon Jutsu goes through a lot of chakra." But what if I tried summoning in Sage mode? Would that help speed it up?" she asked while eating. Naruto gave her a kind look and said, "Actually, no, it wouldn't. In Sage mode you burn up chakra at a high rate, but in Sage mode you have a vastly better control over your chakra. So overall it wouldn't really help you in the long run. What you need as a summoner is just raw chakra and lots of it." She sighed. "How long do you think it will take me to build up that kind of chakra?" she asked. He shrugged while eating. "I'm not sure, but on the bright side you already have more chakra than any other Hyuga." She blinked a few times at him in disbelief and said, "What?" He looked over at her and said, "What, you didn't notice it yet? You have more chakra than your father and Niji combined." She stared at him in disbelief. Are you sure?" she asked intently. "If you don't believe me, then gather some sage chakra and visit him tomorrow. You'll be able to see for yourself. Don't get a big head though. Hayashi easily has the best at chakra control in the village. He'd still probably beat you in a fight if you weren't in sage mode. Also remember, you are the only Hyuga trying to build up their chakra levels like a ninjutsu user," he told her casually. She looked at him and thought, I think I will go to morning practice with father sometime then. Remember, no getting serious. Tsunade said you're still on light training for now," he reminded her. Shizen spoke up suddenly and said, "Oh, I almost forgot. That old book you borrowed from Naruto just after you got put on the same squad, I found it in your bookshelf and brought it back." Hanabi hung her head and said, "Sorry, Naruto. With everything that has been happening lately, I totally forgot that I borrowed it. I never even read it." He smiled over at her and said, "It's okay, Hanabi. Why don't you start reading it tonight? I told you it was written by my master." She got a strained look on her face. Tu was kind of worried about that. "I heard a lot of his books were rather adult-orientated," she said carefully. Naruto gave her a short laugh and said, "Yeah, almost all of them are, but that one isn't." He smiled at her and said, "Trust me, you'll like that one." It was later in the evening, after Hanabi had already gone upstairs to read and Shizen turned in early. Naruto quietly left his bedroom and went out into the dark living room. He stared at the case under his portrait of the second Hokage. The light from outside the window gleamed off its narrow glass front. This is one of the few items in the house that wasn't just protected with a sage chakra trap. He actually studied some of his father's trap jutsu to protect this item. And this item was very well protected. He pulled out a special seal, written on a small square of paper. There were seals on each corner of the paper. He folded the paper in half and stuck it in his mouth. He made 4 hand signs and each corner of case glowed faintly and then went dim. He pulled out another slip of paper with a single seal on it and put a drop of his own blood on it. He very gently pressed the seal up against a glass until he heard a click. He was sweating profusely as he just barely cracked the case open. "Kami, why did I have to borrow 20 paper bombs from Kakashi to make this trap? He only uses the Umbu level ones. I wasn't thinking when I made this that I'd ever have to remove this trap," he lamented. He slid one of his kunai just under the door and cut 2 strings that would set off the paper bombs if the case was opened. He opened the case and slowly cut into the velvet cloth beside each of the 2 pieces of the sword. This disabled the strings attached to backs of the 2 pieces. He carefully removed both pieces of the broken short sword and put a replica in its place. He went through a series of hand signs and put the blood seal back in place. He wrapped the sword in a black cloth very carefully and tucked it in the inner pocket of his coat. Note to self: get head examined for ever putting a paper bomb trap like that in my house, and tomorrow get rid of the thing, he thought to himself. He quietly left through the front door and headed out the front gate of the compound into the clear cool night's air. Naruto showed up just before 9 p.m. at Tintin's forge. Her prop-up-a-frame sign was still out and the chimney was still puffing out smoke. Good, she's working a bit late tonight. I bet she's got some extra orders to complete. That means she's probably not going to be in a good mood, he thought as he hung his head. He quietly opened the door to her shop and entered the weapons gallery. Every kind of weapon you could think of was mounted on the wall, everything from small needles for poisoning to a 30-pound battle axe. At the back of the store was a glass display case with more ornate items in it with a register sitting on top of it. Next to the register was a small bell. Just behind the case was an open door that led into her forge. He rang the bell lightly twice. Suddenly there was the sound of a lot of metal things falling on the ground and a loud bang. "You ouch, ouch, that smarts." He heard her sucking in breaths and sharp rasps for several moments before she said, "I'm coming. Please hold on," she yelled from the other room. She limped through the door and said cheerfully, "Hello, how can I help you?" Naruto gave her a curious look. She was covered in soot and her hair was a mess. She was wearing leather coveralls for working in a forge that were very dirty. Her look flattened out when she saw him. "What do you want?" "I already made the key for Hanabi and I didn't even charge you for it," she said coldly. He looked at her honestly and kindly before saying, "The first thing I want is for you to sit down and let me take a look at your foot." She looked away and blushed from embarrassment. No, that's okay. I'll get Sakura to look at it later." He sighed and quoted, "Medical rule number 27, a medic can restrain a patient if it's for their own good." Her eyes widened in shock and she stuttered, You wouldn't?" He looked at her with a soft expression that was a little sad. "I shouldn't have to with as many times as we have both risked our lives for each other." She looked down and suddenly felt very foolish. She took in a deep breath and waved him around the counter. She sat on the stool behind the counter and took off her left shoe. "What happened?" he asked her in the same soft voice. "I was taking out a cooling rack of kunais when you rang the bell. I thought I locked the door and dropped them after hearing it. I stubbed my foot on the forge hearth," she admitted. He carefully unwrapped her foot wrappings and looked at the damage. Her big toe was split open and bleeding. Her other 4 toes had blood blisters forming on the end of them. "It looks like you stubbed it pretty hard. Give me a second to unseal some of my medical supplies," he said as he pulled out a small green scroll, laid it on the floor. "Unseal," he said while making a hand sign. A small pile of herbs and medical tools appeared on top of the scroll. He picked up a small syringe and screwed a needle onto it. She cringed at the needle as he set it down. He grabbed a hold of the heel of her foot gently and tenderly. Too gently. Shivers ran up her back. Naruto! Don't touch me like that. Touch me more firmly. He sighed loudly as he felt Neji just on the other side of the door to the shop. He felt him turn away to leave. Neji, please come in. I don't want any misunderstandings, he said loudly. And don't throw the flowers away. Neji started behind the door as he was about to set the flowers he was holding behind a shrub before entering. The door opened and Neji entered. Hold the flowers he has behind his back. Tintin looked at him wildly and held up her hands and said, It's not what you think. She panicked and looked over at Naruto. It's not what you think either. He sighed and said, Hold still. Neji looked around curiously and said, Naruto? Where are you? I'm behind the counter giving Tintin medical treatment. She hurt her foot, he said from his kneeling position behind the counter. Neji walked up behind him and saw the pile of medical supplies as well as Naruto. Naruto held up his hand and started pouring his green healing chakra into her big toe. He closed the wound and he calmly said, Neji, can you give me a hand? Please put the flowers down on the counter. There is little use hiding them from me now. Neji shyly took the flowers out from behind his back and set them on the counter. What do you need me to do? He asked seriously even though he was blushing slightly. Just place your hands on her shoulder and make sure she moves as little as possible, he said calmly. Naruto, what are you going to do? She asked in a near panic. He softly and calmly said, I have to drain your blisters before I heal them. Neji moved behind her and placed his hands firmly on her shoulders. She whimpered quietly. Naruto said, I know you hate needles. As long as you stay still you will not feel a thing. I promise you that. She trembled, but Neji held her as still as he could as Naruto drained the blood out of her blisters. Please hurry up and do it already. She yelled at him with her eyes shut while turning her head away from him just as she felt his healing chakra on her foot. I already have. I told you that you wouldn't feel a thing, he said as he finished healing her foot. She opened her eyes in surprise. How did you do that? He looked up at her and said, Just because I am not that great of a medical ninja doesn't mean that I can't keep a patient from feeling pain. Neji whispered in her ear. He was trained by the Hokage and Sakura in the healing arts. He stood up and looked right into Neji's eyes. My friend, I know you two must have had a date tonight. That is why she was rushing to finish her work, but I need to ask Tintin to help me with something very important, he said very honestly and purely. Neji didn't realize he was speaking out loud and softly said to himself, Then tell me words that will steady my heart. Naruto heard him and whispered 5 words to him and he was shocked to his core. You really mean that? He asked him in disbelief. Naruto nodded his head. Neji took his hands off her shoulder. It seems Naruto needs you more than I do tonight. He kissed her on the cheek and went to leave. Naruto, we had been planning this date for 2 weeks, she said sadly. He sighed and nodded his head and said, But you have been training your whole life for this. He kneeled down in front of her. He took out a piece of black cloth from his inner coat pocket and started carefully unfolding it. Again and again he unfolded the cloth, until it finally showed the treasure within its folds, the broken Raijin sword of the second Hokage. She teared up when she realized what it was. This is the Raijin sword, the second Hokage's first strike weapon. It's the second most famous blade ever created in our village. What purpose could you possibly have in bringing it to me? She asked in confusion. Neji turned around at the door and came back over to her and stared at the broken sword in shock. He looked at her intently and said, I want you to reforge it. She stared at him in shock. Naruto, this sword was made by a master smith and sealed by the second Hokage himself. This is way over my level of expertise, she said as she turned her head away from him. You can seal jutsus into other blades and I know you have repaired broken blades before. He told her seriously. I can reforge the blade, but restoring the jutsu that was sealed in it would be nearly impossible. I'd need the jutsu that was originally sealed into it and an unreal amount of lightning from a master of lightning jutsu. Even Kakashi couldn't produce enough for this. She told him desperately. If I can get the original jutsu and I bring you a master of lightning, will you remake the sword for me? He asked her with longing eyes. Naruto, please don't look at me like that. You don't know what you're asking, she said as she grabbed her elbows. Naruto continued to beg her with his eyes. She looked away and down at the floor. After a long moment she said, I will try, but what compensation will you give me if I succeed? Naruto looked down solemnly as he stood up and reached under his overcoat. There was a click as he removed another weapon from his person. He set the short-bladed sword on the counter of her shop. The scabbard was of a rosewood that rippled from dark to light over and over. The hilt was covered in a thick flat blue woven silk twine. Her eyes went wide staring at the short sword he had placed on the counter. Is that really what I think it is? She asked him while reaching her trembling hand for it. She had heard so much about this blade. Naruto said, This is my father's flying thunder god sword. I was going to give it to Hanabi when she became a sage. Niji's eye went blank and he said, No way. That sword was supposed to have been lost just after the fourth Hokage died. It wasn't lost. It was entrusted to his favorite student, Kakashi. On my 18th birthday he returned it to its rightful owner. Me. He said. Please, can I see it? She asked him in awe. He nodded his head solemnly at her. She picked up the small curved sword and unsheathed it. The mirror-shined blade had bright blue runes going down both sides of the blade. Even though the sword was over 25 years old and had been used in countless battles, it looked like it had never been used. This is really the first one that your father made? The one that all your kunais are based off of? She said as she looked at the blade in amazement. Yes, it's the very one, he said as he nodded his head. It's beautiful, she said, admiring it from every angle like she was dreaming. Why are you showing me this? She asked him as her stunned eyes returned to him. He looked at her sad resolve and said, If you reforge the Raijin sword, I will give you my father's sword. She looked like Naruto had punched her in the chest, she was so stunned. Niji soullessly said, You're kidding, aren't you, Naruto? Your father's sword is the Fire Nation's most famous sword. It's worth a fortune. A single tear rolled down her face as she resheathed the sword and set it gently back on the counter. I can't take your father's flying thunder god sword, it's just too much. It was worth it to me just to hold the legendary blade once. She took in a ragged breath and looked up at him with a weak smile. Besides, without your father's yellow flash jutsu, it's just an exquisitely well-made sword. It should stay with the only person that can use his jutsu. This must be very important to you for you to even offer your father's sword as payment, she said sadly. He nodded his head at her slowly and said, Yes, it's very important to me. Tenten looked over at Niji and said, Thank you for the flowers, but I have a sword to reforge. I can't go out tonight. Niji nodded and said, I understand. One last thing, don't tell anyone that we are trying to reforge the sword. Tsunade wouldn't approve of it, he told them. She looked over at him blankly and said, You didn't get permission? He shook his head back and forth. She looked down and slid the broken pieces of the sword back towards him on the counter. She hung her head and said, Then I can't even attempt to reforge it. I'm sorry. Naruto nodded his head at her solemnly. Niji looked at him curiously and asked, What did you want the sword for? I mean, to trade it for the only weapon you have of your father's, you must have a dire need for the Raijin sword. Naruto went over to the door and put up a powerful privacy seal. He turned back toward both of them and very seriously said, What I say here doesn't leave this room. They both nodded their heads with wide eyes. Naruto relaxed and sighed deeply as he looked into Tenten's eyes. I need this sword to fight the nine-tailed fox." They both looked like he had stolen their souls from them and looked at him blankly for many long moments. "Yuri going to unseal Kyubi? Why? Why would you do such a thing?" Tintin said, nearly beside herself with anger and worry. "I don't have much of a choice. The seal holding Kyubi is weakening. Within 2 years it will break and Kyubi will be set free. If I don't die when it escapes, then I will fight the nine-tailed fox, but to do that I need the Raijin sword repaired." Niji finally came out of his shock and said, "So that's why you were willing to trade for your father's sword to get it repaired?" He turned to Niji and said, "Yes, now you understand why I'm so desperate to get it remade." Tintin looked at the floor with a very sad and confused look on her face. "Let me think it over. I can't make a decision like this lightly." He gave her a short nod and walked back over to the counter. He folded the broken pieces of the Raijin sword back up and handed it to her. "Keep this while you think it over. Think about what it would look like if it was whole again." She reluctantly took the black cloth. Naruto picked up the Flying Thunder God and rehooped it to his back under his sage outer coat. He walked over and removed the privacy seal and opened the door. He turned back to her and said, "I'm sorry I had to ask this of you. If there was any other way I wouldn't have asked you." "Naruto," Niji said to stop him. "You're going to give your father's sword to Hanabi after she becomes a sage, why?" He let out a short laugh and shook his head. "She is my disciple. After she becomes a sage I'm going to try to teach her the yellow flash jutsu, of course. She should have enough chakra to learn it by then. Good night, you two," he said as he left through the door and closed it behind him, leaving a very stunned Hyuga and a distressed blacksmith behind. Naruto leaned up against the door of Tintin's shop and stared out into the night for a long moment. Over 400 yards away, well out of his normal sensory range, an umbu with a cat mask dissipated into smoke. Later that night at the Hokage's office. "Hokage, Kakashi has come to see you. He says it important," an umbu said through the door. She set down the papers she was reading and looked over at the clock. It was just after 10 p.m. She leaned back and stretched and then relaxed back into her seat. "Send him in," she said in a none too happy tone. Kakashi entered the office with a serious look on his face. Tsunade's expression immediately changed to worry. "What wrong, Kakashi? Why are you here so late?" she asked while he put up privacy seals up on the door and windows before returning to stand in front of her desk. He took a deep breath and after a long moment he said, "Naruto is trying to reforge the second Hokage's Raijin sword." She gave him a puzzled look and asked, "How?" "I had over a dozen master smiths look at it and they all said it was beyond repair. That's why I let Naruto display it in his living room in the first place." He took it to Tintin. He said calmly, "Tintin? I know she's a smith, but if a master smith couldn't repair it, then what chance does she have? She is only an average smith overall," she said with a curious look on her face. I wondered why Naruto would take the sword to her of all people as well. She has gotten a lot better at her weapon crafting than you might think. She's also an impressive jutsu sealer," he said. Tsunade gave him a flat look and said, "How good?" Kakashi eyed her for a moment and said, "Take out the kunai Naruto gave you and look at the maker's mark." She rolled her eyes at him. "I already know it's not Tintin's maker's mark. I've seen it before, but I don't know whose maker's mark it is," she said as she opened the top drawer of her desk and pulled out the cobalt blue kunai. She flipped the blade over and looked at the bottom of the pommel. Kakashi walked over to her and turned the blade at a different angle in her hands. She looked at it intently and she opened the top drawer again and retrieved a letter opener that Tintin had given her for her birthday a long time ago. "They are kind of similar, but not the same," she said while eyeing both of them. "Take away the NU over the symbol," he said calmly. Tsunade's eyes intently started looking back and forth between the two items. She set them both down on the desk. "NU, Naruto. Uzumaki," She really did make these? The Hokage said, clearly surprised. I did some digging. She makes them with Naruto's help, but can still nearly make them on her own. She only needs Naruto to cast the jutsu. She can even do the sealing part on her own. Naruto normally does it though to save her the chakra. She is also the maker of Naruto's spare estate keys that were designed by the fourth Hokage. He said. Tsunade blinked blankly at him. Kakashi said. With Naruto's help, she can easily go well beyond an average smith, as you called her. You might call her a Grandmaster Smith. She sighed and said. Okay, she is better than I thought, but surely you jest about her being a Grandmaster Smith even with Naruto's help. Kakashi pulled out his own cobalt blue kunai from his holster and presented it in front of her. The fourth Hokage was my master Tsunade. Do you have any idea what is sealed in these kunais Naruto gave to us? He asked her intently. She sighed and leaned back. Frankly, no. I never was talented with time/space ninjutsu. She said as her eyes went wide with realization. Kakashi nodded at her. If she can seal time/space ninjutsu into a weapon, then I think her getting a Grandmaster Smith title isn't such a far-fetched idea. He said suggestively. Okay, so she might be able to reforge the sword and he or she might be able to seal the lightning back into the blade. Where are they going to get the information on the jutsu my uncle sealed into it? It's locked away in the Hokage vault. Even Naruto couldn't break into there, nor would he. She said sarcastically. He wouldn't have to. It is true that the Hokage vault holds the armor and relics of all the past clans to keep them safe, but there is another backup for all the jutsu of the clans. One that he happens to be the keeper of that's under his house. Also, didn't you give him free reign of it to study any scrolls he could unlock by himself? Kakashi said seriously. She looked up sarcastically and said, There's a blood seal on both of the Senju vaults. He has no chance of getting past that without my blood. Didn't you say that before he took a direct hit from the Sarutobi vault's blood seal and easily lived? He said knowingly. She sighed and was clearly getting tired of the verbal chess game she was losing. The blood seal on the Senju vault is much more deadly than one that was on the Sarutobi vault. He would still need the equivalent of a Grandmaster of the element of lightning to cast the jutsu that my uncle's friends casted for him. Unlike what most people think, the sword wasn't forged using a sustained chidori that was sealed into the blade. I know better. My uncle was good friends with Raikidon, also known by other name, the Thunder God. This is why both my uncle's sword and Minato's sword have the same name in their titles, because he used his jutsu to help make them. She said. Kakashi blinked in disbelief and said, You mean the Thunder God was a real shinobi? Yes, he was. My uncle told me he was so attuned to the lightning element that he could control where the lightning bolts of a thunderstorm cloud would strike. You should know him well. He is the one that killed the second Hokage. He was the first Raikage Sambu commander. She said knowingly. Kakashi's was slightly stunned and full of questions. Then why did he help both your uncle and Minato make their swords? He helped the second Hokage before the war started, and after it was over, a long time later, he helped the fourth Hokage make his sword. So you see, there is no way they can remake that sword. She said as she crossed her arms. Kakashi eyed her for a moment and said, There's a lightning master that can call down the lightning from the sky. And he's in this village right now. She looked at him curiously and asked who? Someone Naruto knows very well, Sasuke Uchiha. He said seriously. Her eyes widened for a moment as Kakashi said, If Tenten, Naruto, and Sasuke work together, there is a very real possibility they could remake that sword. Even make it stronger. She took a long deep breath and sadly shook her head back and forth. I can't believe he would go this far to remake my uncle's sword. Naruto and Hanabi were doing their morning training when a Anbu appeared near them. Sage Naruto, the Hokage has summoned you, he said from a kneeling position. He gave the Anbu a curious look and said, Okay, me and Hanabi will be there shortly. She summoned just you, he said seriously. He gave him a puzzled look and created a single clone. Okay. Hanabi, keep trying to summon with my clone, I'll be back shortly. Naruto entered the Hokage's office a short while later. She was going over paperwork as he walked up to her desk. She carefully set it down and eyed him slowly. What is this about Tsunade-chan? I'm still training Hanabi right now. You can't be thinking of sending me on a mission, are you? She reached into her desk and pulled out a small blue scroll and carefully set it in front of her. Why are you trying to reforge my uncle's sword? She asked him slowly. Naruto lowered his head and mumbled to himself. Damn, how did she find out so soon? He picked his head up and said, I need it for my training to learn the lightning element. She let out a long sigh and said, I figured as much. Did Sasuke offer his help in remaking it? Kami, how did you know that? He asked in surprise. I am the Hokage after all. She told him flatly. She looked down at the scroll on her desk sadly for a long moment before asking, Did you really offer Tintin the Flying Thunder God Sword for her help? Naruto suddenly got a sad look on his face as he looked away and said, Yes, I did, but she refused it. She said it was too much. She looked at him sadly and said, You were willing to part with the only weapon you have of your father's to get the Raijin remade. Is it really that important to you? He took in a deep breath and looked her right in the eyes and said with resolve, Yes, it is that important to me. She picked up the scroll on her desk and tossed it to him. He caught it and asked with a confused look, What is this? She looked at him with resolve and said, It's the records on how my uncle and his friend made the sword. The jutsu he sealed into the blade is in there as well. Naruto gave her a blank look of shock. You mean I have your blessing to try to remake it? She hung her head and said, It's just a broken sword right now. If you need it that badly, then yes, you may try to reforge it. But be warned that jutsu in that scroll is at such a high level that I don't even know if Sasuke could use it. And I want you to promise me one thing. He looked at her intently as she said, Never try to trade your father's sword again. It's not like I wanted to part with it. I promise. Naruto smiled at her and ran over and hugged her. Thank you, Tsunade-kun. After Hanabi went to her bedroom, Naruto again slipped out of the house and went to Tintin's shop. Her sign wasn't out this time, but the lights were still on. He went up to the door and said, Did Tsunade send you to protect her shop? And Umbu's head melted out of the wall. Yes, she did. The item inside is still very valuable even in its current condition. She felt it should be guarded. Naruto nodded at him and opened the door. He went up to the counter and rang the bell. I'll be there in a moment, she said. Soon she came out and her look changed to worry and nervousness. Naruto, I am still not, she said as she stopped in mid-sentence when Naruto took out a small scroll and placed it on the counter. She eyed the scroll for a long moment. You don't need to worry anymore. Tsunade gave me the jutsu scroll and her blessing to try to reforge the sword. She smiled at him in relief. Really? He nodded his head at her and said, Yes. Didn't you notice the Umbu stationed outside guarding your shop? She stared at him blankly. I guess not, he said slowly. Is there anything I can help you with? He asked her. Yes, actually. I want to practice repairing this kind of damage to a sword. Follow me, she said as she went back into her forge. He followed her. She went into a corner where some sword blades were leaning up against the wall. She handed him 3 of them and said, These are some of my defective blades. I was going to melt them down, but never got around to it. I want you to break them the same way you broke Raijin. He nodded his head. Okay, if that's what you want. Can I use your vise to hold them though? Sure, she said as he went over to the vise on a metal workbench and clamped the blades into it in a fanned-out pattern. He gave her a reserved look and said, You might want to stand back for this. She blinked at him and suddenly took heed of his obvious advice. He summoned it Rasengan and pushed it into the first blade. It snapped almost instantly. He broke the other two in the same manner and released his jutsu. She walked over and inspected the broken blades. I see. The wind isn't cutting the blade. It's making it vibrate until the blade can't take it anymore and snaps. That explains how cleanly the break on the Raijin sword is. Naruto looked over at Tenten, who was lost in thought. Is this okay? He asked her. She shook her head a few times to come out of her thoughts. Yes, it's fine, she said with a wave of her hand. Is there anything else I can do to help? He asked her slowly. She gave him a questioning look like she wasn't sure she wanted him to help. I can man the bellows, get firewood, massage your shoulders and get you food. Just name it, he said with a boyish smile. She sighed and said, Have you read the scroll yet? Yes, what about it? He replied. What kind of metal was used to make the core of the sword? She asked. He looked up in thought and said, I don't remember. She gave him a flat look and said, You're worthless then. She walked back to the counter and got the scroll. She skimmed through the history and finally got to the part of how the sword was made. The more she read, the more her face became shocked. She walked back into her forge with the scroll in hand and held it up in front of Naruto. You never told me the inactive form of the sword was just the hilt and that it uses a time-space jutsu to summon the blade at will. The layout to make this sword is insane. I haven't even gotten to the jutsu that's sealed in it yet. I'm scared to keep reading. She yelled at him. He sighed at her and said, Look, I don't need the blade to be summoned from another time/space. I just need it to produce lightning. No, Naruto, you do need it to be summoned from another time/space. The blade is always active. It even says in the scroll that when they first made the sword that they made it like a normal sword where the blade was fixed into the hilt. They couldn't find a sheath that could hold in the lightning, and there is quite a list of things they tried. She berated him. Look, I'm not going to pull your leg. I didn't understand diddly squat about what the heck the blade is made of, but I understood the time/space jutsu quite easily, he said. She had an exasperated look and wiped her face with her hand. The door to the shop opened and she rolled her eyes. Kami. Who is it this time? She said as she went back to her counter. Hello, welcome to Tenten's shop of smithery and sealing. How can I help you, Lady Tsunade? What brings you here? Tsunade was standing next to Kakashi while holding a small box and said, I came to hear how you and Naruto are doing on fixing my uncle's sword. She rolled her eyes and said, I've just started reading the scroll. Your uncle was insane to make something this hard to create. She smiled at her knowingly. That's why 12 master smiths told me it was beyond repair. My uncle was very mild-mannered unless it came to anything related to combat, then he was over the top. Kakashi said, We came to add our advice if you needed any. Heck, I don't know where to start. I haven't even finished reading the entire scroll. I don't even know what the blade is totally made from yet, she said as she went back into her forge where Naruto was. They followed her into the forge. Kakashi said, The blade is actually a crystal that was infused with a very special iron to make it stronger. The core of the blade is platinum to conduct the lightning. In the opening of the hilt is a summoning orb that summons the blade from a pocket of time-space that was created in the pommel. The summoner's orb also had a jutsu to fix the blade on it when it's summoned. That's the overview at least. Naruto took the scroll from Tenten and started reading it again. This is pretty cool. It liquefies the core of the blade when it's used and then resolidifies after it's not in use. Oh, that's kinda tricky. It says that if any air is in the core that it will break the blade the first time it's used. Tenten hung her head and said to herself, I really should have taken the Flying Thunder God Sword for this. Tsunade told her, Don't get discouraged. I brought some things that will help. She set the box down on Tenten's soot-covered workbench. She took out the first item. It was a gray necklace as thick as her thumb. Here is some platinum. Kakashi eyed her for a long moment. Did some poor noble guy give you that as a suitor's present? She threw him a scowl and told him quietly, "Hush you." She picked up the next item. It was a 5-inch square flat piece of metal that was half an inch thick. It was concaved and was the same grayish-tan color as the broken pieces of the Raijin sword. Tintin eyed the square of metal and looked back at the Hokage sadly. She put on a fake cheerful smile and said, "What's wrong?" She took a ragged breath and said, "Hokage-sama, this is the left shoulder plate out of a suit of plate armor. Seeing as how the only time I've seen this metal is in the second Hokage's sword, then I'm pretty sure I know what you got this off of." She gave her an understanding look and said, "Yes. I got it off of my uncle's armor that's in the Hokage vault. How they made the metal is lost. I didn't have a choice. I know you hate it when we lose relics of the past, but the sword is of much greater value than the shoulder plate of my uncle's outdated armor." She looked at the floor and sadly said, "This is just getting worse and worse." The next item she took out of the box was a small crystal vial. "This is magma quick crystal and it's insanely expensive. Luckily my uncle left some in our clan vault. You will have to use this to melt the piece of the blade back together as it's the only thing known to be able to melt crystal without shattering it. It dissolves part of the blade and then rehardens after it dries," she said. Kakashi spoke to Naruto. "Do you think you can restore the time/space jutsu?" Naruto was intently reading the scroll and looked up at him. "That's actually the most dangerous part of the whole process as far as I can tell. It says that the blade being moved to its place in the time/space pocket, it's actually what broke the first 2 blades they made. Once it's fixed in that place it's fine though." Kakashi said, "I think you should go with a fixed blade and try to make a sheath instead. We only have 1 broken blade, so if you mess up it's over. Several of the components in the blade are unknown to us." Naruto scratched his head in frustration and said, "Yeah, the only problem is that wood is the ideal sheath, but wood isn't a very good material to hold a jutsu seal in. I'm really starting to see why they made this sword the way that they did. At first I thought they were showing off, but now it seems practical." Kakashi held out his hand and said, "Can I see the scroll?" Naruto handed it to him and he went over all the types of thing they had tried to use to make a sheath out of. "That is quite a list, but I don't see ironwood on the list. It's actually known to hold a jutsu fairly well and probably wasn't available before the eastern shipping routes were opened 15 years ago. It's mainly used for making the lower parts of sea ships as it's so strong." Kakashi said, "Do you think we could get any of that kind of wood in the village?" Naruto asked. Kakashi sighed. "Just about every larger sea ship would have it for in-voyage repairs, but we only get the small ships that come up the river to peddle their wares. It's not likely we can find any of it in the village as most of them are fairly local people. Only a few actually have sea ships that send smaller ships up the river," he said. "Crap, I don't have any of my kunais buried to the south of the village either. That's like a 6-day round trip just to get a log," he said as he hung his head. "You know it's only just after 9 p.m. and I don't think Tsunade has eaten all day," he said suggestively. Tsunade was telling Tintin a story about her uncle using the sword when Naruto yelled over at them, "Hey Tsunade, are you hungry?" She stopped in mid-sentences and turned to him as she raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me with all I've done for you today that you aren't going to pester me about eating. I can get something when I get back to my room. I'll treat all 3 of you to dinner at Takisda and drinks," he said with a smile. "Naruto, I need to read over the scroll. I'll have to pass," Tintin said shyly. "I too have pressing matters to attend to," Kakashi said with a fake smile. Tsunade looked at him carefully and said, "I guess going out for a drink and some food wouldn't be a bad idea." They arrived at the white building and entered the officers' lounge. They took their seat as a waiter came up to them and said, "I'll have your drink shortly." Naruto looked around the lounge and he didn't see any sea ship officer, only the local merchant sailors. "Damn!" he said to himself looking around the nearly empty officers' lounge. The waiter was over at the bar when Tsunade said loudly, Double my normal drink order. Naruto sighed loudly, clearly thinking he was going to be taking a very drunk Hokage back to her room again. I don't see any sea ship sailors here tonight. Why don't you have a drink with me? Tsunade said evilly. Naruto gave her a flat look of annoyance. Because last time you told me to spend the night with you and then you gave me 2 big lumps on the head in the morning. You can spend the night again. But you're sleeping on the couch this time, she said in a joking and warning manner. Naruto's look never changed as he sarcastically said. Then I'd probably get even more lumps from Hanabi when she found out. Suddenly a group of 12 rowdy sailors entered the other side of the bar. The noise from the other room nearly doubled with all the sailors talking so loudly. Tsunade said, "It looks like a ship got here late, but you are still drinking with me," she warned him. He rolled his eyes at her and said, "I'm buying." "I never said I'm drinking with you." She rolled her eyes at him as a mountain of a man barely squeezed himself through the door to the officer's lounge. He was just over 7 feet tall, wearing blue pants, a white shirt, and a red vest. His red hair and beard were shaggy and he had a big red scar over his left eye. He had a bit of a pot belly, but overall he was a powerfully built man of over 400 pounds. "Zachary, can I get 7 pitchers of Reiki ale, please?" he asked the formally dressed bartender as he placed 2 chairs next to each other to hold his massive weight. The barman nodded his head at him. Naruto's eyes lit up. "Hey, Red Scar." "Hello there, Naruto. I see you are with your mother eating at the officer's lounge again. Rest assured I will not be getting rowdy, Miss Hokage," he said, and then laughed as Naruto followed suit. "I'd hope not," Tsunade said, and also laughed. Naruto asked him, "Hey Red, you're a sea captain, right?" He gave him a slightly curious look and said, "Actually, I'm a fleet captain of the high seas, but what of it?" Naruto carefully chose his words. "Would you happen to have any ironwood?" Red Scar let out a great roar of laughter and said, "Are you thinking of making your own sea vassal and trying to compete against me? You look a little green for the sea if you ask me." No, nothing like that," he said awkwardly. "Then what would you need ironwood for?" he asked cheerfully after he calmed his laughter. "The only thing it's good for is making sea ships. For how much it costs for the stuff." "How many planks did you need?" he asked. Naruto looked at him and said, "That depends. How long is a plank of ironwood?" Red Scar gave him a curious look and said, "A plank is 15 feet long." Naruto looked over at him and said, "I don't really need that much. I only need a piece about 2 inches wide and just over 3 feet long. I want to make a scabbard for a sword." I guess it's not the strangest thing I've ever heard before," he said with a shrug. "Follow me to my ship. I've got a few spar pieces lying around." Naruto followed him down to docks until they got to a 35 feet long sailing vessel. He led him over deck and eventually they made it to a very cramped hull. Even Red Scar had trouble fitting in between the barrels of cargo before he finally made it back to a 15 feet long thin box built into the side of the hull's wall. He opened the long thin box and said, "Here is the wood I have. Take a look and tell me which one strikes your fancy." Naruto looked through the box. There were only 2 full-length pieces of iron wood. He took a look at the end of both of them and set them back down as they didn't have the wood pattern he was looking for. Most of the other pieces of wood were only about a foot long and ill-suited for when he needed them for. He then caught sight of a few broken pieces of wood near the box. "Hey, are those pieces ironwood too?" he asked. The captain gave him a confused look. "Yes, but they are quite old. We hit a bottom rock on the way here and had to replace some boards. Those are the ones that broke. We sometimes use them to make wood pulp to seal crack in the hull, but not when they are that old," he told him. Naruto walked up to the splintered plank and picked up one end. He saw a perfect circle in the center of the plank. It was exactly what he was looking for. It was the heart of the iron tree and the hardest part of the wood. "Hey, can I have this piece?" he asked with a smile. Sure. It's just driftwood as far as I'm concerned. It should have been thrown overboard already, he said casually. I won't even charge you for it. On their way back to the bar, Naruto suddenly remembered something. Hey, Red. The giant man looked down at him and said, Yes? Naruto gave him a confused and curious look before asking, Have you ever heard of swordfish swimming up a freshwater river before? Red Scar suddenly let loose a great merit of laughter. Naruto smiled innocently and scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I guess my eyes were playing tricks on me that day, he said. Red Scar calmed his laughter and said, I doubt that. The swordfish is one of the noblest fish of the sea. Beautiful and powerful they are. A fellow captain of the seas of mine sometimes catches them and sells them off as pets to nobles. Naruto looked at for a long moment before asking, Then why was that so funny? He smiled back at him. Because the noble swordfish is a very lousy pet. If you put one with any other fish, it will kill them. That fellow captain of mine calls them sucker pets for nobles. They put them in their showy tanks with other fish to display them, and they come back to find a bloodbath of fish guts. That's when they normally let them go in a river. I bet a noble found that out the hard way the day you saw that fish. To think there are nobles that still buy those things, he said, and then laughed again. They returned to find that Red Scar's drink order had been moved to the Hokage's table. Tsunade was already halfway through her bottle of sake. You two took too long, she said, slightly annoyed. Naruto set the 4-feet-long 5-inch thick plank that was splintered at one end next to his chair and said, Sorry. His ship was at the other end of the docks, Naruto said as he sat down to his plate of food. Red Scar eyed the Hokage carefully. Do I take it that my drink order being moved is an invitation to drink with you, Miss Hokage? She looked over at him and said, Yes, seeing as how Naruto doesn't want to drink with me tonight. She scowled at Naruto. Red gave her a smile as he put 2 seats together across the table to hold his massive weight and sat down. Thank you for the invitation, he said respectfully. Naruto eyed Red Scar and asked, Why are you drinking tonight? I thought you didn't drink very often. I hope you didn't lose another sailor again, he said. Nothing like that. I pulled my back a bit while repairing the ship. I only want to dull the pain. He picked up the first pint of ale and downed it in a single gulp. Tsunade said as she poured another shot for herself. That's good to hear. How has your business been lately? Fairly good. We started shipping exotic fruits recently and they have been a big hit, but our main seller is still the basics like metal, fabric, and weapons. Tomorrow will be a great time to make a pie. We are offloading quite the shipment of limes, strawberries, cherries, and melons to the local merchants, he said, and then downed another pint of ale and set the empty glass down. How has life been in your village? He asked. Naruto wanted to tell him about the Chunnin exams but knew he was forbidden because Red wasn't supposed to know about their secret ninja village. Red Scar already knew more than he was supposed to about their village. It's been pretty quiet. I've taken up teaching and I have a new student, he said, thinking carefully how to explain to him without revealing too much. Red nodded at him quietly and said, Ah yes, I remember you telling me you were a martial artist in your county's military. How are your students coming along? Are they still hot-headed thinking they can beat their master? Tsunade laughed loudly. Definitely not. Everyone in the village knows not to mess with Naruto. His students are among them. Naruto scratched the back of his head innocently and blushed slightly. Yeah, they are coming along pretty well. We all entered a tournament of sorts together and my 2 students fought each other in the semi-finals. Match. I was in the other semi-final match and my opponent forfeited to me after seeing the 2 of them fight, he said shyly. Red Scar and Tsunade laughed. Well, if your martial arts skills are even close to Miss Tsunade's, I can see why, Red Scar said while smiling. Tsunade drained the last of her bottle of sake as Red watched her and he shook his head. I've sailed all over the seas and I've never seen another that could drink as much as you can. He turned to the barkeep and loudly said, "Another bottle for Miss Tsunade on my bill, please." Naruto gave him a sour and warning look and said, "Hey, if you sauce her up then you take her home." Red laughed quietly and said, "That actually happened one time when you were not here. I found out very quickly that your village guards are very protective of her. 10 of those guards that were black followed us the whole way. One tried to stop us from leaving the dock area, but she told him to leave us alone. We were both pretty drunk and staggered all the way to that huge building that she lives in. I handed her off to the guard at the door and got sick over the railing. I was very regretful at that moment for trying to drink her under the table. I could hardly move and I was about to pass out when one of the guards wearing green heaved me onto his shoulder and carried me back to my ship. I think he might have been a guard leader or something as he was strong enough to lift and carry my weight. Anyway, the next day's voyage downstream had to be the worst day of life. I was so sick that day," he said as they laughed. The 2 days later, after training Hanabi, Naruto again slipped out of the house and went to Tenten's shop. The Umbu guard waved him in at the door and he entered her weapons gallery. He never rang the bell and slipped into her forge. He could feel she was very low on chakra and she was in the middle of casting a jutsu. She had the Raijin sword in a vise with the blade halves clamped together like they were whole. The place where the two broken halves met was glowing red like magma. Tenten both hands were stretched on in front of her hold onto a jutsu. All around her gray dust filled the air and was slowly being drawn into the blade. She was very dirty and sweating profusely as she hit her knees. "Oh no! It's breaking, I can't give up. But I can't go on. I'm almost out of strength and chakra." She thought between labored gasps for air as she kept drawing the metal dust into the crystal blade. Naruto wore a solemn and very resolved look as he moved behind her without her noticing. Her mental state looks like it's about to break. And she's burning up too much chakra as well. I guess I'll have to help her, but can she really endure my chakra at its purest state? He thought. He summoned the purest of blue chakra into his hand. Chakra that was infused with his will. It was only the size of a candle's flame, but it radiated his very being. His will. Naruto looked at the chakra in indecision for a long moment as Tenten's chakra was fading. I haven't even given Hanabi chakra of this kind, but if it is the only way, he thought as he touched the blue flame to her back. Her fading eyes snapped open as she instantly burned with bright blue chakra that surrounded her body. Not only did she burn with chakra, but she was infused with Naruto's indomitable will. A will that would never give up or back down. A will that didn't even know what the word failure meant. "Aga!" she screamed while throwing her head back as she was set on fire by his chakra and his very being. The dust in the air was instantly drawn into the blade and it glowed white. The heat in the room became unbearable and Naruto wrapped his arms around Tenten then disappeared as the metal workbench sweated melting metal droplets. They reappeared outside of his house. Naruto was standing while Tenten panted on all fours. "Are you okay, Tenten?" Naruto asked her as he kneeled down. She stared up at him with a crazed look of absolute resolution in her brown eyes. "What the hell did you do to me?" she yelled at him. He reached out and placed both of his hands on her shoulders. He looked at her softly and said, "I couldn't let you fail. So I touched you with my will of fire." His will of fire, I can't believe a feeling like this exists. I feel like I could do anything without fail, even level mountains. Is this how you always feel? Is this how strong the will of our future Hokage is? She thought wildly. She closed her eyes and saw Naruto. He was bigger than a mountain and he was looking down at her from far away. She suddenly felt very small next to him, like she was a grain of sand next to a mountain. Memories of Naruto filled her mind. She saw him charging into battle with powerful opponents again and again. She vividly remembered the play he acted out for Irika's class on the Battle of the Three Sannin. She saw him surrounded by the Toad Clan when he fought Pain. She saw him fighting Sasuke on the day he ended the Fourth Ninja War. This is the will of fire of Naruto, I see. This is why he could always face such powerful ninja without fear or doubt in his heart. This is why no one can truly stand by his side as his equal. She thought. Naruto gently shook her by her shoulders. She came back from the depths of her mind and looked at Naruto with confusion in her eyes. "Hey, are you okay, Tintin?" he asked her kindly with concern in his voice. She shook her head as she got up on her feet. "Yes, I am. I've just never felt a will of fire as strong as yours. I was a bit overcome by it," she said as she looked away from him. He nodded his head in thought before saying, "Are you ready to go?" She turned and gave him a confused look. "Go where?" Naruto gave her a boyish smile and said, "Back to your forge, of course. I want to see if you were successful in remaking the blade." She smiled shyly at him and said, "Oh, that right, I'd forgotten for a moment." They walked back to her forge. All the windows were open and the Umbu guard was by a tree near the door. "A little warning would have been nice when you released a wave of heat," he said. Tintin looked over at him slightly embarrassed and said, "Sorry, I didn't realize that was going to happen. I take it you were the one that opened the windows?" "Yes, I didn't want the shop to burn down. I am here to protect it after all. I've also sent word to the Hokage," he replied. Naruto walked up to the door and opened it. "Let's go see if she's going to kill me or not," he said to her. Her forge had always smelled like soot and burning iron, but it was even stronger now. They went back into her forge and looked around. The part of her vise that was holding the blade had melted. The metal table had bumps where it started to melt and reharden. The melted vise was barely holding the gleaming yellow crystal blade. Tintin rushed over to it and started examining it from every angle without touching it. Naruto walked over to her and asked, "Did it work?" She eyed him coldly. "Quiet! I'm trying to see that now." She scowled him as she went back to her work. After many long moments and she held her hand over the blade. She touched it with her finger and smiled. She then tried to remove it from the vise. "Crap! It's stuck in the vise. Help me get it out," she asked Naruto as she tried to open the partly melted vise to no avail. Naruto crouched down in front of the vise with an intense look of thought on his face. He rubbed his chin a few times before getting an innocent look on his face. "Actually, I don't have a jutsu that is going to help us here," he said. Tintin's sweat dropped and fell over. She got up and yelled at him. "You're supposed to be the most powerful ninjutsu user in history and you can't handle this?" He held his hands up at the outraged weaponsmith and said, "Sorry. My earth jutsu isn't that good or refined yet. My wind jutsu is too powerful, I could damage the blade if I used it." Tintin looked at him with a sour look. "You're useless," she said flatly. Tsunade sighed loudly as she walked into the room. "I came here to see how things are going and all I find is you two arguing." She walked over to the vise and looked at it for a moment. Tintin grabbed the blade, she said, and Tintin held onto it. Tsunade grabbed both sides of the vise and pulled it apart with a loud snap of her monstrous strength. Tintin carefully examined the rest of the blade. She then pulled out the scroll and started reading as she looked it over. "There are no air pockets in the core of the blade," she said blankly and then suddenly smiled. "I think I did it." Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as Tsunade said, "Maybe Kakashi was right about you after all." She looked over at her and asked, "What did he say?" "He said with Naruto's help you could become a Grandmaster Smith," she told her and then turned to Naruto. "Have you managed to make a sheath for it yet?" Naruto pulled out a scroll and set it on the ground. "Unseal," he said while making a hand sign. There was a small puff of smoke and then on the scroll there laid a 3 feet long ash-colored sheath. "I'm no good at carving out stuff like this. I got someone else to form the wood into a sheath. I've created a pocket of time/space in it to contain the blade. I just hope it's strong enough," he told her. Tsunade signed at him. If it isn't strong enough, I have a containment room set up to house the sword in until you can find something that will. That's only if you can seal the jutsu into it. She gave him a knowing look. Tintin laid the blade and the handle out on her workbench and started getting tools. Tsunade eyed her critically and said, "You're not actually thinking that you're going to finish putting it back together tonight? You are filthy and exhausted. You need to go home and rest, Tintin." She turned and looked at the Hokage. Pure determination shined brightly in her eyes. "No, Hokage-sama. I want to finish it while the will of fire burns brightly in me. I want to see it whole again. I want it to be wielded by a leaf ninja so it will give hope to the people of the village again," she said with conviction as she grabbed the two pieces and slid them together. "To us weaponsmiths, remaking a masterpiece like this is our greatest dream. I can't stop when I'm so close." Tsunade turned a sour look to Naruto and said, "This is all your fault. You always have this effect on people." He smiled at her and shrugged. Tintin turned to him and said, "There isn't much of the quick magma left. I'll need your help to form the summoning crystal and the blade together." She put on an old pair of leather gloves and uncorked the small crystal vial. She set the vial down and got out a straight edge to make sure she formed it at the correct angle. Tsunade sighed loudly. "I guess there is no point talking to you. Umbu!" she yelled into the other room. The Umbu guard was instantly bowing at her feet. "Go get the lightning master," she told him. After 20 minutes, Tintin with Naruto's help fixed the blade into the hilt. "Wow, you did it, Tintin!" Naruto cheered her. She pulled out a cloth and wiped some of the soot off of her face. "We should probably let the quick magma cure overnight just to make sure the hold is as strong as possible," she said, clearly exhausted while she looked at the sword that was lying on her workbench. "That will not be necessary. It's fully cured in 5 minutes," Tsunade said as she looked at Tintin. "Are you ready to go home now? It's about to get dangerous when the lightning master gets here. We don't know what will happen if the sealing fails." Tintin smiled at her. "There's no way I'll be able to sleep until I know if it worked or not." Tsunade rolled her eyes and sighed. She clearly didn't want her to be there if they failed. "He's almost here," Naruto said as he went over and picked up the sword. He walked outside and everyone followed. In front of her shop was a small open clearing in the woods. Naruto walked to the center of the clearing and waited silently for many long moments looking down the road. An Umbu with a man dressed in white was slowly walking up the road. The man in white used a cane and his eyes were covered with a bandage. Tintin's eyes went wide when she realized who it was. "Sasuke, that he's the lightning master he was talking about?" she said breathlessly. "I thought he gave up being a ninja and his jutsu." Tsunade leaned down and whispered, "He's not a ninja. He's just helping his friend. I take it Tintin has remade the blade seeing as how I was summoned Naruto," Sasuke said when he was right in front of him. Indomitable determination shined in his eyes as he said, "Yes, Sasuke. She did it. Do you think you can cast the jutsu I told you about?" Sasuke gave him a sneering smile and said, "You may be the hero of the village, but I'm still the best lightning master in the village." Naruto smiled back at him. "Have you prepared the chakra we are going to need?" Sasuke asked. "Yes, I have. I've got over 400 clones worth standing by," he said with a smile. Sasuke chuckled softly as he tilted his head down. "I figured you'd go overboard. There is no way we will need that much." "Hey, at least I came prepared," he said loudly. "I've gotten the guard to read the scroll to me. I can cast the jutsu in it, but I feel it would be better to use one of my own instead. It doesn't matter what jutsu is sealed into the blade as long as it's lightning-based. I have a plan. Instead of using a sustained attack and sealing it multiple times, I'd like to seal one of my strongest lightning attacks into the blade," he said. Naruto eyed him curiously. "And which one is that?" You'd have to use the curse of my clan for this to work, my old friend, he said, and then sighed. Naruto stared at him with a serious look while he thought for a long moment. You want to try sealing Kirin into it, don't you? He said slowly. Sasuke smiled at him. Exactly. Naruto looked up at the sky and thought. The moon was full and heavy rain clouds were in the air like broken pieces of a puzzle scattered across the sky in disarray. He looked back at Sasuke and thought. He sighed and turned to Tenten and Tsunade. I think it's time you guys clear out. It really is about to get dangerous, he said seriously. Tenten looked at him in confusion and asked. Wait. What is this Kirin jutsu you are talking about? Tsunade put her hand on Tenten's shoulder and said. He's going to call the lightning down from the clouds. Nature's lightning, and it's vastly more powerful than anything a ninja can create alone. He's right, we need to get clear of here to be safe. But my shop is here, she protested. Your shop is safe, Tenten. I've placed a barrier. Seal on it, the Umbu guard said. Tenten slumped her shoulders in defeat and left with Tsunade and the Umbu guard. Sasuke gave Naruto a knowing smile after the others left. You know I can't perform this jutsu in the village. It's far too destructive. He nodded his head at him and looked off into the distance. His eyes locked onto the tallest mountain in sight. He pulled out one of his kunais and put his arm around Sasuke's shoulders. They disappeared into the night.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.